his calling card, if you like, was to bite the balls off the victims.
For God's sake.
He'd leave his teeth marks. So
is that how they apprehended him then? Through
yeah.
the
I mean, he killed a few before he was arrested. He even went back and pulled her out from wherever he'd left her, so that she would be found. He says, I've just had a phone call to tell me there's a camera over the road watching us. Now, I know that's true because of the job, but I'm expecting them to say, and I know who you are. Yeah. A couple of sweets. So everyone's looking. What they mean is, got a couple of police officers. So them two were identified as police officers. Next minute, the window goes in, and there was tables and chairs coming through the window. And it was like a bomb had gone off. So we went outside, and they're all Turkish lot were there. And they're like this to us, slit your throat. They brought 2 kilos with them this day. It was in a black bin liner full of soil because they'd had it buried in case any of their houses got searched. I had it in between my legs as I'm driving, trying to dial a number for the office to tell them what's happened. There's a backup team coming, arrest team, who don't know who I am.
Oh.
So they think I'm one of the villains running off.
Right.
Yeah, because they haven't been briefed properly that morning. So next minute, they kicked my legs. I hit the floor, broke my cheekbone, and knocked my tooth out. He's telling me he's never thought about what he's going to do with someone as much as he is with me. Yeah, this is when I make the decision to covertly tape record conversations. Because I knew Will was coming off with this guy, and he said, it doesn't matter who you go to speak to, they'll always side with me because that's the way the system is. And what he's been doing is, he's been putting all his Masonic police officers in positions in the CID. So all the fraud squad were Masons, and all the drug squad were. And John Stalker says to him, they are the only people I can trust. So again, it shows you the corruptness within GMP of what went on there. When I leave that night, someone tries to follow us from the underground car park when we come out. So the driver had to shake them off. It was all because they thought I'd done the dirty on the chief inspector, who was a Mason. Yeah, and got him shifted overnight.
Don't mess with the Masons.
Well, no. So this is what they did to me. So that day, it was like the last bit of the jigsaw. I realised then what had gone on. This is what it's about. What these people in authority think they can do to people.
Yeah.
When just to protect somebody because he's in a bloody Masonic lodge.
To hear it from you, Gary, is so powerful because David Icke can say it, but you've lived it.
Lived it, yeah. There's many times where I could quite easily have gone and killed myself. And what have I done wrong? I haven't done anything wrong. I did the job they wanted me to do. I got the results, and yet that doesn't mean anything.
Today we have Gary Rogers, and many of you have watched our ex-cop playlist. People are absolutely fascinated by the stories of the police. And, I've learned so much as well from the stories of the police because you hear a lot, the news portrays a lot, but it's like they say about, soldiers who are sent overseas, they're the ones who know the most about what they're doing, why they're there, and if there's any government corruption or manipulation. Same with the cops. If you're putting your life on the line for a profession, you are going to get up to speed on what is going on in the world. And there's so many good people working for the police. But on this channel, the cops that we've interviewed, the ex-cops, many of them are campaigning for an end to the war on drugs. They believe that's a bad use of the police resources and taking all those resources to go after the predators, and that women and kids should be prioritised over revenue generation and the mass incarceration of low-level drug users. It seems to be upside down right now because the women we've interviewed have been victims of heinous stuff. The guys who committed these crimes have got very light sentences. So also today, there's going to be a Masonic element to the interview. We had another cop on and he talked about that a little bit, but I think we're going to get into way more depth today with Gary, who was working with the Greater Manchester Police. His total police career is 30 years, almost 3 decades. And 6 years was spent full-time undercover. Not just undercover in the UK, but also abroad. He was awarded the Queen's Police Medal for this work in the New Year's Honours. And senior officers ended up doing some underhand stuff. And he learned, that higher up the ranks, things are not quite what they seem. And many of these senior officers are members of the Masonic Lodge. I'm getting asked about the Freemasons all the time. So his book, and what is the book called, Gary?
Undercover Policing and the Corrupt Secret Society Within.
Undercover Policing.
Quite a mouthful, actually.
And the Corrupt... I love that subtitle. The viewers are going to be all over that. The Corrupt Secret Society Within.
Yeah.
Wow. So the link for the book will be in the description box below the video, as will all of Gary's links, and as will all of Jen's links, our new co-host. If you're not familiar with Jen yet, she runs an organic cotton clothing company. And love this blue we've got on today.
So today, yes, this lovely blue dress was gifted by Nomads Clothing. So that's www.nomadsclothing.co.uk. Head over to their website and you can buy one yourself.
Find the link in the description box below the video. So we've got covert policing, the 1990 World Cup in Italy, armed robbery, murder in the UK. On and on and on it goes. Hopefully we can fit it in within 2 hours. So, huge thank you for coming on then, Gary.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you, actually, for giving me the opportunity to speak about this, because it's a subject, as you've just mentioned, Masonic influence, certainly within the police, that a lot of people don't want to touch for one reason or another. I mean, I've got my own views on that. Another thing I just want to make clear from the start is, yes, I've had a book published. There'll be some people out there perhaps saying, here's somebody else now jumping on the bandwagon, ex-police officer, had a book published. The main thrust for me having this book published is purely to get the story out about what GMP Command did to me and how it affected not only my life, but my family's life. And for no reason than to protect a corrupt senior officer. So that's the main thrust of it.
Yeah, and people think you're a millionaire if you got a book out.
Oh, exactly, yeah.
It's J.K. Rowling, Stephen King, Jeffrey Archer. Being an author is actually one of the lowest paid professions according to the Society of Authors.
Yeah.
So, it's you're doing a lot of activism by the sounds of things, exposing what's going on.
Well, yeah, and I wouldn't be sat here today with a book if what had happened to me hadn't have happened. I wouldn't be here talking about the undercover side. I have to talk about my early life and the undercover side because the story wouldn't be the same without it. I can't start where my troubles started. You see what I'm saying? And the actual publishers, I was contracted to so many words, and I went over, and their own editor, who was given the job of trying to reduce it, said I can't reduce it. It has to stay in.
Wow.
So that said a lot to me.
Yeah. So we're going to get to the Masonic thing later on, but we did have a cop on who spoke a bit about the Masonic stuff. Did you get to see that?
Oh, certainly, yeah. But
what did you think? What did you think of that?
It's always been in the police. I mean, I joined in 1975, and throughout my career, it didn't affect me till I had the troubles. But it was always well-known fact that certain senior officers would be in the lodge. Now it didn't bother me because I didn't get into any departments I got into or any jobs through being a Mason because I'm not a Mason. But I don't hold it against them. And the other thing I want to make clear is I've nothing against Masons per se. I just don't think that police officers should be Masons because there's a conflict of interest there. Now, one thing I'll say at the moment, the guy I'm going to talk about later is Detective Chief Superintendent Dave James, who was the head of GMP CID. Now, he ran a nest of Masons wherever he was. And he was a Mason. The admin sergeant in the CID at that time was higher in rank in the Masons than Dave James.
Wow.
So when they're at work together, how does that... And this sergeant, got in trouble for... allegations with females at headquarters, and he was always protected.
Wow.
Where he would have got anybody else kicked out.
So
he was protected by Dave James. So, this is how I've seen it work myself while I've been in there.
So stay tuned for the Mason story, but we're going to go back first to how Gary got into the cops. And as a young person, did you aspire to become a police person?
Basically, I'm from Salford, Lower Kersal, from a 2 up, 2 down terraced house. My mum and dad didn't have much money. I went to local primary school there. They're always trying to strive to do better. But my dad's big problem was he was a gambler. So any money he got always went on the horses. And my mum paid the price for that because she used to work as a manageress for a dry cleaners. He would have the take-ins off her. And he'd go gambling it away. Then he wouldn't be able to pay it back. So she'd have to say to the boss who was coming down, where she hasn't put the money in the bank straight away. So he'd then be going to friends, relatives to get money back, to pay her back, so it could go in the account for So she was always under pressure like that, basically. And that put me off gambling because of what I saw. And I also saw the aggravation she got off him, but we never had any money because of him and how he was. So, I went to a local primary school. And as a kid, I could have gone one of 2 ways later on in life. Because I could drive when I was 15. I learnt to drive. And I used to work at my uncle's shop on a Saturday, Sunday. And he was a great guy, but just didn't see the problems he was causing, perhaps himself and me. But he'd give me the keys to the van. And on a Saturday, Sunday at 15, I'd go doing deliveries. Now, I had no driving licence, no insurance. And if I was to have had an accident, I wouldn't be sat here talking to you today as having been a police officer. Also went shoplifting. So, I've come from that sort of background in Salford. I could have gone from one of 2 ways.
What were you shoplifting?
What did I do?
What did you steal?
I used to wag school. That's the other thing I got in trouble for. By luck more than anything else, I passed the 11 plus. So I went to Salford Grammar.
What did you shoplift?
All sorts. But this is
For me, it was like candy bars and Marvel comics.
Yeah, but what I did was, with my coat, I sewed false pockets on the inside.
Oh, how clever.
Yeah. And it'd be holes in my pockets. So I could have my hands in there and drop the stuff on the inside. We were in a big store in Manchester one day, walking out, and one of the counter staff saw us, and she shouted. And it was like the piano player in the cowboy films, when they walk in the bar, piano player stops. Everybody in the store stops and look round. And she made us walk back and put it back. Now, that day she could have detained us, got the police, could have had a conviction. Again, my career could have gone through the window. But that's the sort of people I was knocking about with. Even because I could drive at 15, the temptation was to go and have a car away. I have been out with keys trying to get a car with mates in the past because I could drive. So that sort of thing was going on. And I didn't do well at school. Went to Salford Grammar. Was always, as we used to call it, wagging school.
Yeah.
Come out of classes, hide me blazer in a substation nearby, and we'd go off. And that's when to go into town, start shoplifting and stuff like that. And then, when I got shouted at that day, I knew I'm going to have to get me act together a little bit. Our housemaster, he said I was knocking about with the wrong people. So he wrote a letter to my dad. And he got me in. He said, "I wrote this letter to your dad. I'm going to send it to him." So I promised him I was going to change my ways. And I didn't. So he wrote another letter and sent the pair of them. And that morning, I can still remember now when they arrived and how my dad was, because I ended up on the other side of the room. Such was his anger.
Right.
And he went back in, put the wheel back on for me, because they were going to expel me. And I got my head down for the last 6 months. Left school without any O-levels because I didn't take them, because I hated school. So I just wanted to get out. And I could join the cadets at 16. My brother was in the police 2 years ahead of me. So he'd come home with stories. And I think that's what perhaps got my interest in it. Yeah. So I focused for the last 6 months.
Wow.
I was 16 in the October of 74, which officially I could leave at that age. But I couldn't because I had to wait till the Easter break. So I was nearly 16 and a half then. And I left, walked through the gates, never looked back. And I've never bothered with anybody I was at school with since. Because having come from Salford, to say you're going in the police wasn't the right thing to do.
Yeah, so like for the American viewers, let's explain a bit more about Salford then. So when I was a young person, I had a girlfriend out of Salford. And if you go Salford now, they've got the Lowry, they've got the water, it's all the redevelopment. But back then, I would go to the council flats to see her, and the Salford skinheads would chase me back to my car.
Which part of Salford was she from?
I can't remember. It was just in these big high rises.
Flats.
Yeah.
Could be near where I was because there was Lower Kersal flats where I was. So
Yeah.
a lot of high-rise flats anyway in Salford.
Were you part, so how old are you, Gary?
I'm 63 now.
Oh, shut up.
Okay, so when the...
Don't say that. You need to go to Specsavers.
You do look young. Yeah, you definitely look young.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sean got called for 42 yesterday.
I love
didn't you?
that, yeah.
Yeah.
So when the rave scene began then, you were way older for that.
Oh,
then,
yeah,
weren't
yeah,
you?
yeah,
You
yeah.
weren't part of that,
No,
the
part of the
Manchester.
rave.
Madchester.
No. And only on one of the jobs, I had a supposed wine bar from round the corner from the Hacienda.
Yeah.
Which we used
Oh,
on
Hacienda.
from the
Yeah.
as an undercover operation I was on. We used that just round the corner from the Hacienda. But I'll come on to that after.
Okay.
Wow.
So joining the police then, what was the procedure there?
So I tried early doors in '74 to go. Went with my dad, saw Mr. Thomas, who was the recruiting officer at South Mill Street in Manchester, and he said, "I can't take you on until you've left school. So come back in a couple of months." So obviously I went back, took the exam, which I passed. Then I had to have a medical, then an interview, then I was in. So I left school on the 27th of March, '75, started on the 1st of April, which was quite daunting because having been as I had been at school and not towing the line, to go from that with no qualifications into the police, which was quite a regimented service. If I didn't do what they said, I could be out. Then I'd have no qualifications to get a job. So it was a bit daunting in that respect. And I went there that morning. We sat in a room like this, all those new recruits that day. And it was like being in a doctor's waiting room. Everyone was just sat looking at one another. And then I was in there for the next 2 years, which, I enjoyed it. It was great. Some of the departments I got to was fantastic. Did certain things perhaps which, you might question now. I worked at scenes of crime. And,
Before we get to that, what's the training like?
Oh, sorry. Training, right. You would obviously get kitted out of uniform. You had to have the right haircut. There'd be a lot of marching, always being inspected. You had to have your boots pulled up. Training every week at the YMCA in Manchester. And the YMCA in Manchester then had an indoor running track in the roof. So we had to go once a week. And they'd run you ragged up there. So much so, many days where I'd be sick because they'd run that much. And then we'd be doing physical activities. So it was all focused on keeping fit, being smart and learning the law. And then you'd go out to different departments, like traffic on the streets. So you'd work with shifts and go out and get a general understanding of what it was going to be like to be a police officer. But I loved it that much. I used to walk from my house in Salford into Manchester in my cadet uniform, which if something had happened nearby, I wouldn't have had a clue what to do.
Did you get any stick from that?
Yeah. But not like you might get today. I think certainly PCSOs today, police community support officers, must get a lot of grief.
Yeah.
Because even police officers today get grief, and one half the time have to take it. Whereas I think there was a bit more respect for police in the 70s.
Before the war on drugs,
Yeah.
How soon before you went to an autopsy?
Well, I went. I was going to say before I was with scenes of crime, so we used to go out taking fingerprints with the guy every day. And there was a murder in '75, Wanda Scala, Trevor Hardy, who was a serial killer, and his calling card, if you like, was to bite the nipples off the victims. And I went to the mortuary where Wanda Scala was on that day. So, and I put in the book, at 16, to see that. No one said to me, "Are you all right to come in?"
That must have been traumatic.
Oh, well, like many other things after that happened.
That was your
but at
first
that
16.
time, even the guy I was with didn't say, "Do you want to step out of this?" Or, "Do you want to come in?" It was just taken as read that you would go in, and because you're going to be a police officer.
Yeah.
So it's like the mentality is, you're going to see this anyway, so come in.
Do you think they did it for the shock factor?
No, it's just that they didn't think anything else of it. He was they're doing that all the time. I'm a bit of a pain in the backside because they've been taught to take me out with them as a cadet, and he's just getting on with his job. So he's not on the welfare side thinking, "Are you okay, Gary, to see this?"
What was the serial killer's name again?
Trevor Hardy.
Trevor Hardy. Did he
Yeah,
have
and
like
he killed another girl called Sharon Mossoff, who I knew because she went to a youth club I used to go to in
Oh,
Salford.
God.
And she was murdered by him. And
How was he abducting the women?
he just Wanda Scala was a barmaid at a local pub, and she was on her way home from the shift at the pub, and he attacked her on a building site, and he hit her with a slab. I mean, I won't go into detail on here how she was, but that was his calling card. And obviously, when he bit, he'd leave his teeth marks. So
Is that how they apprehended him then? Through
yeah. I mean, he killed a few before he was arrested.
Did he?
Yeah.
How long was he going?
But it was just,
for?
I don't know at the exact time, but I know he killed a good few, Wanda Scala, Sharon Mossoff. But to go to the mortuary and see that at that age and see how she was horrendous.
Did they give him a nickname, the media?
They may well have done. I can't recall it. I've not followed his life since then. You know.
So what would they have done then? Brought in an expert to examine the bite marks?
Yeah, and I know with I think it was Sharon Mossoff. He'd left her somewhere, and nobody had found her after a few days. He even went back and pulled her out from wherever he'd left her, so that she would be found. But you know, to think you've murdered somebody and left them, and you go back to the scene later and pull that person out and get away with it again.
Didn't Sutcliffe adjust some of his corpses?
Sutcliffe, I don't think. Oh, he went back because one of them had a £5 note.
Yeah.
From wages, from his wages.
Yeah.
Which he got spoke to about. They went to the company after. I think that was one of his big concerns. That £5 note was on.
Yeah.
One of the women that he killed.
So in terms of this killer, then, expert looks at the teeth marks. Does that get run through like dental records then?
To think you then have them bite marks, you could then marry those up. If you actually get a suspect later, that would come into play then, wouldn't
I
it?
think this is back in the 70s.
The 70s, yeah.
So he was brought in as a suspect, was he? And then it matched.
Well,
Teeth matched.
They would have took those details when they found the bodies, because every time he did it, he'd be leaving those marks. It's not like they didn't have DNA or anything then. But when they'd actually got a suspect and arrested him, they would obviously be able to marry that up. You know, and it's so conclusive, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can't say that's not my teeth marks
Yeah.
unless he had all his teeth out.
So that woman then, you saw the corpse. Was there an autopsy performed?
Yeah.
What's going through your head watching an autopsy?
Well, her face was black because she'd been hit with a paving slab.
Right.
And I don't know to this day, you know, how I continued to sit and watch that and stay and watch it because and the smell in there was horrendous. This detergent stuff that they have as well. But it must, as you think, as a 16-year-old, to see that, and I've only not long since left school. You know, so
did that break you in, or were you equally shocked for a few?
I
more
can't even tell you
occasions?
today what effect that had on me. I don't know if it was a good effect or a bad effect, but it can't really be a good effect. I don't think. You know, any traumatic incident that you witness or or see has an effect on you. You might take some good out of it in one way. You know, being in the police, it's stiff upper lip, isn't it? You get on with stuff, and that's what you're paid for.
How long were you with that unit?
I was in there for 6 weeks. So you would go as a cadet you would go to departments for 6 weeks at a time.
What was the next serious crime they put you in that unit?
Well, that was the main one I went to. The rest was your normal stuff. You know, there's always somebody getting broke into. So they would, and it was just by chance when I was with him that day. That's where we went. Now, you know, he hadn't planned that, and it was just by chance I was with him. But the rest of the stuff would have been mediocre stuff, if I can say that. You know, it's not mediocre to the person who's been broken into, but you go in doing the same sort of stuff. They're there brushing, looking for fingerprints where someone's got in.
What was the next unit you went to?
I'd gone to working, as I say, on traffic.
So it was traffic after that one?
Yeah.
So you got to arrive where there's fatalities and crashes?
I was with on afternoons one night with one of the lads there, and we turned onto the East Lancs Road in Swinton, and it looked like someone had thrown a coat on the floor. It was an old lady who'd been hit, and no one had stopped, and she was just in the middle of the East Lancs Road. And the headlights picked it up, stopped, and obviously she was dead. It's like these things go on, don't they?
Nobody
and
stops.
you know, it's like murders these days. They don't make the front pages because they become that commonplace. But that's what I think. I also got a buzz out of it because that's one thing about being in the police.
Anything can happen.
No 2 days are the same.
Yeah.
It's not like, you know, going working in a bank and you're going doing all the figures every day and it's all mundane. And it's like Groundhog Day, isn't it? Police, you don't know what's around the corner.
Do you say that's what the police and criminals have got in common then? That adrenaline thing where anything could
Excitement.
happen?
Well, I certainly think so, yeah. You know, it's that, me and Shay, who's come with me today, we were talking about this on the way in. He was saying to me, he doesn't get the same high now from anything from when he was doing the undercover work.
So you become
You
numb
can't
to
get the
it.
same high, so it's addictive. And having been an undercover officer is addictive because you get a buzz from it.
What was the biggest challenges working for the motor side of it, the vehicle side of it?
On traffic,
Traffic side of it, yeah.
what I loved about that was that buzz you also got when you were going to jobs because they'd have the sirens going, the horns, and you know, to be going through traffic at speed.
Were you the driver?
No. This is as a cadet now. I mean, I went on to pass my advance later on, so I got to do that in my career. But as a cadet, 16, sat there with them and whizzing through to jobs was fantastic. You know, that's another thing you get a buzz from. And when I eventually got on traffic years later, that was one of the things I loved, getting a job where I had to put them on, especially on the bikes.
What did you do after traffic?
You then went on streets. So I would then, the last 6 weeks of being a cadet was at the Crescent in Salford, which was renowned at the time. Anybody in Salford wouldn't want to get arrested and go to Salford because, you know, and it's no secret, some of them would get spoken to and you wouldn't mess about. You know, like today, you look at the police programmes on the telly, the way staff are treated. And I'm not saying that's right. It's good that the video in it because there's no accusations then. But, you know, Salford was renowned for no trouble. And when I went to work at Salford, you couldn't move through Salford after 8 o'clock at night without seeing police everywhere. If you were coming out of Manchester and something wasn't right, you were guaranteed to get a stop. Whereas I go now, and I say it regularly to people, I've travelled here today, I haven't seen any police.
Is it because they're understaffed now, though?
Well, they've got to be. I mean, Great Manchester Police, when I started, was 7,500. I mean, I think they're down to 5 now. Wow. So that tells you a lot, doesn't it? And then there's the government saying we're recruiting another 20. You know, that's throughout the country. So they're not. You're not getting extra staff.
No.
And then they're talking about, you know, all these different departments. It's no wonder people get away with what they get away with because they haven't got the staff to look into it.
What's the biggest challenges in working in Salford then, as a cadet?
Obviously Salford, certain parts of Salford where you know, people wouldn't want to go. And but again, when I was there in the late 70s, mid 70s it was great because the police in Salford were respected to an extent. You had the docks down Trafford Road, always trouble there at the docks with the seamen coming in, but the police had it sorted and they'd be there and they had the staff to deal with it. That's what I liked about it. And, you know, you go to the Crescent and these people were arrested, dealt with and put before the courts, as it should be. So it was great.
You said there was always trouble at the docks. What kind of trouble is that?
Well, when they've come in and having drinks and there's a lot of prostitution down there, because obviously the ladies would come because you've got the boats in and that at the docks. So the two go together in some respect down there. Then they'd be drinking, buying them drinks, all
brawling,
night. And then they'd be fighting out, you know, outside and whatever. A lot of thieving from the docks as well. All this went on.
Showing up at fights then, if the fights are still active as a young person, how did that feel?
Well, you felt one thing I hated was because I always wanted to be a police officer, and as a cadet, you had cadet on your shoulders, as opposed to a police officer would have numbers.
It's like a target sign.
Yeah, cadet, and a blue band round your hat.
Yeah.
So I took my cadets off. Yeah, because I didn't want to be seen as a cadet, and it sounds daft that. And I went in the CID office at Salford one night with in my great coat with a big black coat, and a detective sergeant there who was renowned, and he was asking me who I was because I didn't have them on. And he said, "Why haven't you got something on your shoulders? You look like an ARP warden." He said. And but that was me. I didn't want anyone to know I was a cadet. I wanted to think I was a police officer. But, you know, you go to some things with these officers and you'd feel out of it because... But on the other hand, you know, we got a call one night down Trafford Road. Someone was breaking into a phone box, getting the money out. And I went in a Mini, which were the Panda cars then. And the officer I'd been put with, big fattish guy. It took him half an hour to get out of the Mini. But as we turned into the street off Trafford Road, we could see the phone box ahead. And obviously those Pandas had police in lights on the top. And they must have seen us coming. And they were out. And I could see who was in it as we're driving up. And they all legged it. I was fit because of all the fitness in the cadets. So I got out and I was off after this person I'd seen inside. Caught up with them in the estate, grabbed them, bit of a grapple, brought them back. And it was a girl, turns out, but was renowned in the area for trouble.
Right.
Now, by the time I've got her back to where the police car was, he's just getting out. Now, the point I'm making, you know, again, that's another thing for me. Police officers should be fit. And it seemed to me it was going like, once they've got the probation in, which is the first 2 years, a lot of police officers went downhill. You know, they're eating pies at work, fish and chips, and they won't be able to run after anybody. But I proved the point that night that when I chased that girl, and she had been breaking into the phone box, and I had to put a statement in, and she got charged. But she was arrested because of my fitness and being able to get hold of her. You know, so that was another good reason for having me with him.
So do you think they need to bring more fitness programs?
You should be fit, shouldn't you?
Yeah.
You know, and what I don't like today is when I see police officers stood around with their hands in their pockets. To me, you know, you get respect by the way you look as well. And police officers in the past, certainly when I joined, with the top hat, the big hat, and you had to be smart. And that says a lot to people, I think. You know, first impressions count. If you turn up looking like a bag of crap, you know, you're not doing yourself any favours.
Were any brawls that were hard to settle down?
Well, more so later in when I worked at the city centre on the A division, because that was a bit of a unique division to work on then, because people would come in of a morning to go to work, so it'd be very busy in the day. They'd go home at tea time and then come back at night for the nightlife. Not the rave clubs you'd like to talk about. Talking about Fagans on Oxford Street and you know, all those sort of clubs. But then it would kick off. But the beauty of being on the A division was it was a small division but very busy. But because you had a lot of staff, then if you got in any trouble, there'd be someone with you in no time, you know, to help out. So there's a lot of fighting on the A division because you know, the two go together, don't they? They're out for the night, they drink, and then it starts fighting.
What was the department then after that department that you just said you were in?
Once I'd finished on the streets, that was the very
Salford.
last department you ever went to. So I then completed them 6 weeks. Then I then went to Bruges in Warrington, which is where you go as a new police officer. Because I would then finish my cadets, because I was then 18 and a half. So I then become a police officer. And then you go for 12 weeks to Bruges in Warrington.
So Warrington's next to Widnes, my town. Where's Bruges?
Oh, it's a housing estate now. They closed it down. It's on the A57. I think the actual area is called Bruges. It's called Drive. I can't even tell you. There's a big pub as you come off the motorway and get onto the A57. There's a big pub on the right. Just as you go past it, Bruges was on the right hand side.
Did that have some unique challenges?
In as much, not for me as such, because bearing in mind I'd only been in the police for 2 years by then, so I was accustomed to, you know, what it was about in some ways. But certainly the discipline. But I had people in my class there who have come from Civvy Street. One of the other people in there was an ex-squaddy, but everybody else was from Civvy Street. So to be then thrust together in that environment, where it was very regimental again. You'd be up in the morning, marching, running. Every time you walked around the centre, you saw a boss, you had to salute. So, but it was all done for the right reasons, to instill into you about that respect and things. But then that was intense because you were learning the law then to become a police officer. And every week you would have an exam. If you didn't pass it, you got backclassed. And if you didn't pass that one, you were out. So, you know, the clock's ticking then.
Do they still have that to this day?
Well, they don't have the police training centres now like that. I think every force does its own or you can go to college or something, get a qualification, and join the police then, because you've got the knowledge of the law to become a police officer. So, but it was a big mistake closing them down, because going to Bruges, you would have officers from all over the country coming there, and you'd bond together with 12 weeks training. And like everywhere, there was a guy who used to do the physical training there, who was an ex-Marine, and his party piece, he could get in the swimming pool he used to smoke, drink a lot. His cigarette would get down to the butt nearly, put it in his mouth, and his tongue would come out and take it in. And he would swim underwater to the other end, swim a length, come out the other end, open his mouth, and all the smoke would come out. But it's not something to be proud of, and you shouldn't be smoking, to be fit. But he could do that.
Wow.
And it was unbelievable.
Quite a party trick.
and I know it's true because I see him do it.
Yeah.
But it was a great experience. I enjoyed it, and I got because of my 2 years as cadet, I got made class leader, which at my age, 18 and a half, and there was people in the class who were a lot older. To get made class leader was great for me, which was indicated by a white lanyard on your shoulder. So I was responsible for the class. You see, that was given to me, that responsibility.
Did you find them being older that they gave you a bit of stick?
Well, I think I had I just joined and got that, and not having been in the police for 2 years already, it would be a bit more daunting. But perhaps my attitude at the time was, I know more about it than you do because I've been in 2 years. I've just arrested somebody before I come here on that at that phone box, so I've got a bit more knowledge, haven't I? But the guy who was from the army, he didn't like it because I think he thought he should have got it, But and the other thing about being there at that time, there was where you were housed was called the snake pit, so there was 4 recruits to a room. Yeah, I mean I became a trainer at Bruges years later, and then they had their own rooms en suite. Recruits. So to think there was 4 of you in a room, and you had 1 bathroom at the end of the corridor. But we got to know one another well, obviously. As a result of that.
Was Warrington easier to police than Manchester?
Well, I wasn't actually policing Warrington. I was just there to train. So you're in. It's like being in a camp. So you're there for 12 weeks, learning the law, and hopefully getting to the end of it, so that you then become a police officer.
Where did they send you then?
I went to the A Division at Bootle Street.
The A Division, what does that mean?
Great Manchester Police have several divisions. So the actual area of Great Manchester Police is split into divisions. So the A Division is the city centre. B Division was Collyhurst. C Division, Greymare Lane. F Division was Salford. So they were all responsible then for their own areas. So you, as a new recruit, would get posted to one of those divisions, wherever there was a vacancy. So when I went, there was about 2 others as well off my when I went to Bruges. 3 of us went to the A Division together, and that's where you would then do your probation, which is the 2-year period. But I went there started April 77, and obviously did 2 years probation. So in 79, April 79, I'd got through it, got confirmed then as a police officer. So they can only get rid of you then if you do something corrupt, criminal act. But they could get rid of you for anything if you didn't come up to scratch within that 2-year period.
Right.
So what crimes were you investigating there?
Well, on the A Division, it was, as I say, shoplifters, all manner of things really, because obviously there were not as many people living there at the time as there is now, but you still got burglaries in the stores, all the shops, a lot of fighting, alcohol problems. So you were getting a whole array of things really. But when you first go, you're out for 8 weeks with a tutor who takes you under their wing. Whether they want you with them is another thing. But the idea is, I got put with somebody who was in a Panda car, so they get sent to all the jobs. So you would go around with them, and it's a big learning experience, learning curve. And obviously you've got to get on with that person, haven't you? Thankfully I did. The shift I went on, everyone was great from the moment I started. I started actually on nights. That was the first one I had to walk in that parade room as a new police officer. we sat there for the parade, which is you have to stand there with your handcuffs and your truncheon. And on nights, you have to have your torch as well and your notebook, produce them. Disciplinary offence not to have them. And then once you've gone through that, they've checked you, you sit down, and then they go through what's been happening on the division, who you might have to be looking for, where crime's being committed. So you get the rundown, then you get a patrol to work on. So the main ones I got was Oldham Street and Oxford Street. So you think about that, having to walk up and down Oldham Street, Oxford
What's
Street.
that like? I've never been.
Well, Oxford Street was busy,
Yeah.
as was Oldham Street, but on an outer division, you would be given a bigger area to cover. But just be walking up and down a street all day, and the boss who was in charge at that time, it was a disciplinary offence to go in any premises and have a cup of tea if they caught you, because his view on it was you should be seen outside. Now, my idea about policing is you police with public's consent. So a lot of places, I ignored that and obviously went in places. And by talking to people on the division, you get to know things. And they're pointing things out to you about certain things they've seen, which is what policing's about. I mean, on Oxford Street, I used to go in the BBC. And I was there when they were filming Cheggers Plays Pop. If you remember Keith Chegwin, you don't know him?
Vaguely, I remember in my head, vaguely.
Yeah.
I was
Everything I've
probably
mentioned
little.
this morning, nobody knows what I'm talking about. Keith Chegwin had Chegwin Plays Pop, and they had Susie Quattro, Devil Gate Drive.
Remember Susie Quattro?
Yeah, well, they were filming that for his show, and I stood watching it, and little things like that. I got into with the Opera House as well. Ken Dodd was there. Stood in the wings watching his show. Obviously, I should have been out, but I'm still talking to the guy on the stage door, and he'd be telling me things that had gone on. So that's what it was about for me. But it was all manner of stuff on the A division. You didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, I had one incident, which I mentioned in the book. I was on nights, got called to Albert Square about 2 a.m. Car had been stolen. So I go, and there's this lad who's had his racing green Mini stolen. It was 4869, numbers like that, TJ. And I've always liked Tom Jones. I'm going to admit that to you today. But I thought that number at the time would have been great on his Rolls Royce or something, personal number. So I took the details of it, circulated it, and it went on, in case any other officers come across it. And that was at 2 a.m. So I continued with the shift, finished at 7 a.m. I'm on my way home. And I'm at a set of traffic lights in Salford, waiting to turn right. As I'm dozing off because I just want to get to bed. And I'm looking at the car in front of me, a racing green Mini. And it was this 4869 TJ. So I thought, he must have got his car back, this lad. So as the lights change, we turn right, and I go on the wrong side of the road, and I'm looking in to see. And it's not the guy who reported it. It's some bit of a scrote, actually. So I bid my horn, and he looked at me, and I pointed to him to pull over. Now, I've gone into police mode now, and I haven't been in long because this is about 1978. And I've got my blue shirt on, which is what we had then. I was in half police uniform. So he pulls up, and I pull up behind him in my own car. It's now about 7:10 in the morning on a Sunday. And I got out and I walk to the driver's door. Now, bear in mind, he can see me in the wing mirror. He doesn't have to be the brain of Britain to know what I am now. And I got to the driver's door, the revs went up and he took off. So you know straight away then, don't you? So I get back to my car, no mobile phones then, and it's 7:10. The only people about are villains like him, police officers going home from finishing work. So I'm after him, and we go down Lancaster Road, right up to Elms of the Height, and he gets on the dual carriageway, Broad Street, going into Manchester. And I can see through the back window of the Mini, and I can see the butt of a rifle. And he's messing as he's driving along. So he comes off the slip road to Salford Precinct, where it is now. Big Pendleton roundabout, it's massive. He comes off there, and I come off the slip road. By the time I got into the roundabout, he stopped on the left. The door's open, and he was stood with a rifle pointing at me. So, unheard of at the time.
What went through your head?
It wasn't a regular occurrence, guns like that. And I don't know to this day if that was an imitation, if it was what do you call it, air rifle, or if it was real. And I had split seconds to think about what I was going to do. And I looked at him and I just carried on round the roundabout, drove round, trying to get my head together more than anything else. And as I come round, he'd obviously jumped back in the car, drove off down Broughton Lane, and he went off right or left. So I searched for him, couldn't see him. Mobile phone, I went to her phone box, rang the control room, they circulated it, but I don't know who he was, what he was doing, or what he'd been doing since nicking that car at 2 a.m. Now, I posed this question to people. When I went a trainer at Bruce years later, I've told them about that, and I said, what would you have done? And all the macho ones go, I'd have rammed him. Yeah. So I'm in my own car, new police officer. I'm full of what's right and what's wrong, reasonable force that you can use. And I'd argue now that if I did ram him, I would have been safe because, as far as I'm concerned, that was a real gun. You know, it might have turned out not to be afterwards. But they say, let's ram him. And I put that, what if it was an imitation? Would you still be okay to have done it? I don't know what you would have done.
So if you rammed him, you're putting yourself in the proximity of the gun, aren't you? You're putting yourself in
Not only that, but say I rammed him and killed him.
Okay.
And then
Was there a guarantee?
if I'm going to ram him with my car coming off that slip road,
Yeah.
I just drove straight into him because he was stood at the back of the car. The car's got the driver's door open, and he was stood at the back of the Mini, pointing at me.
He'd have opened up, wouldn't he?
So, well, if it was a real one,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's one possibility.
Yeah.
What if it was an imitation and he didn't open it, and I just rammed him and then I put him into back seat of his car and he's dead, and then they go, it's an imitation.
You should have known.
I would have parked at a safe distance and called back up.
I'd like to think.
Mobile phones.
I'd like to think though the courts,
Radio.
Have you got
Police radio.
No, I was in my own car.
Oh.
I'm on my way home from work.
Oh, I didn't realise. I thought
No,
you would have had
no.
a police radio.
No. I finished at 7.
Yeah.
It's just by chance I'm going home to get in bed,
Yeah.
and I come behind it at a set of traffic lights. So I'm in my own time now.
Yeah.
I'm not at work. I'm finished. I'm in half blues because I'm going home, and then I come across it. That's when I stop it. So nothing, no police radios, no nothing.
I think you did the right thing then, because that's an armed response situation, isn't it?
Well, not only that though, ethically, what would the courts have thought of that? Would they have said, would 12 members of the public on a jury say you did the right thing there?
Yeah, if it was like a
Ram it.
teenager with an air gun.
Because you've got to put yourself in that position.
If it was a teenager with an air gun, it'd look bad, wouldn't it?
But this was a guy, he wasn't a teenager.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a guy. And
Yeah.
again, the way he was going, when I come across him, he was waiting to turn right into Lancaster Road, which takes you straight down to the East Lancs Road. And I think he was going to go down there, left, to Liverpool. I'm not calling people from Liverpool. I'm just saying, that's the way he seemed to be going. Yeah. Now, again, I still don't know who he is, what he was doing, and it still bugs me to this day. And that was 1978.
Yeah.
But totally. And I had to go the following day to the Criminal Records Office, look at photographs, see if I could pick him out, which I couldn't.
Yeah.
Last thing I remember, all I saw was a gun when he pointed it at me, and I went round the roundabout. But blimey, talking about filling your Pampers, it was a nightmare.
What was your next big hair-raising challenge after that one?
So obviously that was on the A division. We did that. In terms of the major things, I think I always relate back to the undercover side. You see, because it's normal policing up to that point. On the A division, dealing with that was out of the ordinary, as I say, because you never had gun stuff coming up, people being shot. But I think that's the main one for me when I got as an undercover officer, which obviously I'll come on to later. Mm-hmm. But anything you go to, though, is bad because you don't know what's going to happen.
No.
And there's many occasions when you're on your own and there isn't people to come and help you. So, you've just got to get on with it and deal with it as best you can. That's the thing. So I spent 2 years on the A division. But the other thing that happened there, which I'll highlight, I started there in 77. 78, my dad collapsed on the 18th of December. 78 at home. I was on afternoons and he got took to hospital and they kept him in. He was only 42. So I went to see him Christmas Eve. And this is how concerned we were. We'd been going every night to see him. Mum had gone on the 23rd The 24th, had he have not been in hospital, he would have been going to friends Christmas Eve. So I said to my mum, you stay at home, I'll go and see him tonight, and you get ready, because we're going to go to friend's house. I'll take you. So, happy with that. I went to see him. He was sat up in bed in Salford Royal on Chapel Street in Salford. And he just said to me, don't stay for the full hour, just stay half an hour, and go home and take your mum to their house. So I said, all right. So we had a chat, he was set up, and I walked down the ward to leave, and I looked back to wave, and he wasn't looking at me. So he didn't wave, which I didn't think of till after. So anyway, I take my mum to where she was going. Next morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, phone call. It took a turn for the worse. So can you come? So having been in the police, alarm bells were ringing anyway. We drive down the Crescent, and I can see through the second floor window, Salford Royal, where his bed was. And the curtains were around. So we get there, stoppers on the ward. Can't go down the ward. Come into the matron's office, which again is a sign. When they had matrons,
Yeah.
and they get my mum in, who hasn't got a clue, and tell us he died. Now, when I was there Christmas Eve, I'm not calling the nursing staff, but they had limited staff on, and they were getting ready for a bit of a party on the ward, which I can't blame them for because they're working Christmas Eve. But it's always been in the back of my mind, did he take ill? And there wasn't somebody there because of that. Now, so he sat up at 7 o'clock the night before, then to die. So I walked out of the matron's office and they tried to stop me. I just pushed past them. Went down the ward, curtains round them, he was still in bed, dead. So I was 20 then, he was 42. And this is the police again for you. My brother worked on the A division with me on a different shift. So Dad died, 42, they got us both in, the chief inspector, and he said, only one of you can have compassionate leave. Whoever's dealing with the funeral can have it.
Hell.
The other one's got to come in. So
Oh my God.
he's 2 years older than me, so he took on the task of arranging the funeral, and I went back to work. Now, I beg that question in my book. Would they get away with that today?
No.
Not at all. So I had to go in, and ironically, that week when I went back, I got a sudden death at the NCP car park, back at Kendall's, 42-year-old guy who'd had a heart attack. And I had to deal with that.
So that brought
This
it
is
all
the
back
week.
home.
The week
Yeah.
after my dad's just died. Not even had the funeral because there was that many people died that Christmas. We didn't get the funeral till the January. So, so yeah, again, I'm 18 and a half, 19, and you've got that. But,
Your
but
head
you're
must
told to, you just get on with it.
You must have just been in a bit of a daze, though.
Again, I said to you before, I don't know what effect that has had on me. It must have affected me. I don't know it has, and I hate Christmas for that reason, which is hard for some people
Do
to
you still to this
understand.
day?
Why, yeah.
Yeah.
And every Christmas day, I go to the cemetery because we have a book of remembrance, and I go there. I've not missed it in the 40 odd years. I've gone every Christmas day, and for another reason as well now, which I'll go on to, because my best mate on that shift was a lad called Tony Quinn, and I used that name as an undercover officer further down the line, which is what I did. People I knew, I used to use their names because I'd remember them.
Yeah.
Which was important, obviously. And so my dad dies Christmas 78, and Tony's on my shift. Great lad. We used to knock about together. I went downhill when my dad died, so I was drinking, smoking. We'd finish whatever shift, we'd be out drinking. And he was a good mate to have with me at the time. So we're on afternoons. And when we did a shift of afternoons, which was 7 on the trot, you'd finish on a Tuesday night at 11 o'clock, and then you'd have Wednesday, Thursday off. But it was always the policy then. We'd go out somewhere at 11. So in Stretford, there used to be a club called The Boat, and it was a boat on the river. And it had 2 dance floors. It was an old term, discotheque, which you won't have heard of.
Discotheque.
Discotheque, yeah, that's where we all went. And it was open till 2, you see, in the morning. So we could finish at 11, get your glad rags on, then you'd be out.
Out on the boat.
And it was a team building thing as well, because we'd all just done the 7 days afternoons. We'd put up with whatever we had to put up with, and we'd go out and unwind, and then we'd be there. So I was on the van that night, which meant my shift, they'd finish at 11, but the van stayed on till midnight, just to cover for the night shift coming on. So there was always somebody out in case something happened. So I drive in through the gates at Bootle Street at 11, and they're all there with the glad rags on, waiting to go. And Tony was with them. And he looked through the passenger door window and he said, you come in? And I said, as long as I don't get tied up with anything, I said, I'll be there after. So I carry on and I finish at midnight. So this is only 6 months after my dad died. And I say, I took a nosedive and I lost weight. And I wasn't in a party mood to go there. So I went home. So I got in bed and at 4 a.m, on the front door, look out through the bedroom window. There's 2 colleagues off my shift stood there 4 a.m. So I go and open the door. Lo and behold, tell me Tony's dead. They finished at the boat and they were going on to a policewoman's house after to carry on having a bit of a party. And he'd gone back to Boodle Street, got his motorbike, come along Deansgate, and when you get to Shude Hill, to Knott Mill, at the end of Deansgate, it used to bend to the right and used to Mancunian Way flyover. And he didn't turn right, he went straight on at the lamppost. Broke his jaw, which went up into his brain. And killed him. And I just spoke to him a few hours before. So in the space of 6 months, I had my dad die and my best mate. And again, we were on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday off, back on earlys on the Friday. Nothing from the police about, getting anybody to have a chat with you about anything.
So he never had time to grieve for either.
Not for that. And at his funeral, they had the drape. They had a full ceremonial funeral. So at Agecroft Cemetery, there was police officers in uniform all the way down. I carried the coffin with the drape on from GMP. And, how do you get over something like that? At that age, he was only 21. And in my book, there's a picture, one of the pictures, because he's at Agecroft Cemetery, so when I go Christmas Day for my dad, and my mum now, who's died, I go to his grave as well. And it's sad to say, it's like unattended now.
Really?
Yeah, so I always take some flowers, clean it up, and leave it right. But it says on it, PC Anthony Walter Quinn, 21. And I think how many years ago it is now. But again, police, then we're useless. Do as we say, not as we do. Yeah, very dictatorial. They're like gods, so if they said jump, you jump.
What was the next big challenge in your career after that stuff?
So I stayed there. I needed to get out of it, basically. And I've never been one of these people who can stay in one place for a long time. Some people join the police and they'll stay on one division for the 30 years. And that's great. I'm not calling them. But that wasn't for me. So I needed to move on. So a vacancy arose to be for an advanced driving course. But the thing about it was you had to agree if you passed to go on traffic. So I wouldn't have wanted to go on traffic really, but I wanted that qualification because that could open doors for me as well. So I went and did the course. And that nearly went pear-shaped because you used to have get to the driving school in Longsight every morning. They'd have a parade. There's a little sergeant there who everybody hated. He was only small. He used to have his cap the peak was cut like over his nose, like SS officer. And they used to say about him, he's never seen an angry man outside, but he loves being able to have a go at recruits who have come for driving. So one of the things you had to do was pre-check the car before you took it out. So the lad I was on the course with, we said we'd checked it and didn't. It was a 3.5 litre Rover. And we set off to the motorway and there was all this rattling. So guy who's the driving instructor says, pull over, let's check what that is. So he got out. He already had a red face. But when he was at the front wheel looking at us, it went even redder because we hadn't tightened up the wheel nuts. Now, had we ever got going on the motorway, that wheel could have come off.
How fast
Literally.
were you going?
Well, we hadn't got on the motorway. What I'm saying is it started rattling before we got there.
Thank God.
Now, that's the whole point of having a vehicle check every morning, to make sure the vehicle's safe. And that brought it home to me. But again, I was like cutting corners by, we've done it. And he says, have you checked the car before we go? Yeah. Because they'd leave you to it to do it and trust you. And obviously, we hadn't. And that's what happened. So I knew every time after that.
Check the car.
Yeah. So I passed the advanced course, went to Salford Traffic then. So I worked there for 18 months. Obviously, got involved in a lot of chases and things like that because they used the traffic department for that.
What was the craziest chase?
I had one guy who, if you've got an advanced ticket, you don't like to have any PVAs on your record, police vehicle accidents. Yeah, because you see yourself as a bit of an elite driver. So I was on Eccles New Road on nights, and a motorbike went flying past me. So I went out after it. And I could see the number, so I gave it to the control room, and it came back to an address in Salford, but not reported stolen. So I had the blue lights on and everything, and he wouldn't pull over. So I chased him, and I put it out over the radio, so there was other patrols making their way in. All you can think of is it's been stolen, perhaps, and not been reported yet. So eventually we get to an address in Salford, and I'm right up behind him, and we pull up into a side street. He gets off and doesn't put the bike on a stand, lets it go, and it falls onto the front wing of the 3-litre Capris that we had then, which were beautiful cars.
Capris.
3-litre Capri.
Yeah.
We used to call them the Jambutti cars. They were white with a red stripe down the side. And he let it go and hit the wing of my car and crunched the wing. So he ran off into the house. So I was out of the car, went in after him, and I realised there's a party going on. And he'd run into the hallway and into the front room. Loads of people there, but I hadn't lost sight of him. And I grabbed him, dragged him out. Yeah. Now, that could have gone one of two ways. With those cars then, when you're on traffic, you didn't have a personal radio on you. You had the radio in the car. So I'd been given a commentary about where I was, but I didn't then tell him I'd got out of the car, because my mindset was, where's he going? Especially when he's just damaged my car. And I was in and dragged him out. Now, they could have attacked me in the house. Nobody would have known where I was in the control room. But I got him outside, and the joke was always, after that, it got reported as a police vehicle accident, even though I hadn't, hit him, just because of what he did. And they always used to joke, that I'd hit him and knocked him into the living room. That's how he ended up there. But that was great. That was where it got the adrenaline going as well, when you're chasing people like that. So I went from there, and then an advert came up for the motorbikes. So I went and did Advanced Motorcycle, which I loved, being on them, because the buzz you get from that on those big bikes, especially with the horns and the blue lights. And I also did my Class 1 HGV, which came in handy later when I became an undercover officer. But it wasn't for me, if you see what I'm saying. Traffic wasn't for me. So whilst I'm on the bikes, there was an advert again. And I want to stress, I'm not getting these because I know people. I'm putting in for them like everybody else. But I go and have the interview, and I was successful. So another job came up for the Regional Crime Squad, which is now National Crime Agency, I think they're called. Became the National Crime Squad, and then it's National Crime Agency. So I put in for that and had the interview. And it was one of those departments where you couldn't read up on what they might ask you for the interview before you got there, because you didn't know. It was very hush-hush. And what they do is, they did surveillance. So they would have a full surveillance team. If they got intelligence that you, Sean, was up to no good, they'd put a job together and we'd follow you then. We'd obviously invariably pick you up at your house or where we knew you were, and we'd be following you. And you've got to be an expert at that, because the biggest time you're going to get picked up on is when that person leaves the house. Because that's when they're expecting the police to be looking at them. Once they get away from the house and you've done everything right and they're happy, they don't look as much then, and they're away. They get on with what they're doing. So one of the things they asked me was at the interview, would I be happy to go round the roundabout the wrong way, as a surveillance motorcyclist, which is a bit of a weird question. But I just said, I would be, as long as it was safe, because you don't get a license to go killing people when you're driving like a lunatic like that. So I got the job, moved on to the Regional Crime Squad. And one of the big jobs that was running at that time, which wasn't a surveillance job, but it was Operation Belgium. And that was into the armed robberies in Manchester at the time. And it was two people, members of the team. Main members was Fred Scott, Lenny Pilot. And they were doing armed robberies every week. And they were called the Crazy Face Gang, because they used to wear, the rubber masks of old men.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So they would have them on with sawn-offs. And imagine that, how frightening that must be. And a guy who was in the office at Bolton on the crime squad, who I refer to as Harry, he's the guy who then went on to run the undercover unit I became attached to. He was a DS, Detective Sergeant, in the office. And Operation Belgium was his operation. Now they got away with, and this is why James Anderton put armed responses on the streets in Manchester for the first time, because of what they were doing. So Henry, who I'm talking about, put an operation together, Operation Belgium, and it was very successful. Obviously, they two of them turned Supergrass and talked about the rest of them. And they got like 14 years apiece. But that was a fantastic thing to be involved in and watching and see how the whole process went down and how they were interviewed. And then I went to the trials after, where they, as Supergrasses, were giving evidence against their co-defendants. And people thought they would never do it, to stand in the box and face those you've been a member of the team of doing armed robberies. You've got to have some balls to do it.
What kind of security did they have?
Well, there was armed response. I used to go in the back of the vehicle in the van with Fred Scott from where he was housed to Lancaster. They held it in Lancaster because of corruption. They didn't want it anywhere in Manchester. And we went to Lancaster every day with an armed escort into the prison, into the courts there, straight in. And I watched him give his evidence against them all. And, he got 10 years and another 8 years for being involved in that, but concurrent with his 10 years. And new identities when they came out. But they cleared up all those armed robberies. It was a fantastic job. But, another job we did was a team from Salford who were doing cash-in-transit vans. So the information was they were at one of two addresses when we turned out in the morning. So you can't be everywhere. So we had to split the team into two. So half the team went to one address. I went to the other address with a car which had two officers in. So there's the car, me on the bike. Sod's law, these two come out from the address we're at. So we're on the radio then telling them to make it up, come and join us. We go off down into Trafford Park in Manchester, and we get to Trafford Park Road. There's a bank on the left and a cash-in-transit van. So they go past as they're looking at it. They don't know we're there now following them. And we're being a bit more discreet because we've not got a full surveillance team. But they do a left by the pub, which is still there now, drive to the bottom, come round, park up again. The passenger gets out, makes his way around the back of the pub, across the croft, to the cash-in-transit van, attacks the guard, grabs some bags, and he's off. Now, those two in the car who are watching this, the passenger gets out, rugby tackles him in the middle of the road. The bags fall and there's money everywhere. Now, the driver of the car helps him because he's trying to get away, isn't he? Now, the only person who's left is the driver in the car, who's round the corner and can't see what's happened to his mate, because he just sat there with the engine revving, waiting to get off. So I came, and the bike is normally protected on this surveillance. They don't want anyone to see it, but needs must. So I came round the corner, and he sat there. I didn't look at him, and I just pulled up, and there's this pub on the left. And I got off, and I looked like a courier. I've got a leather motorcycle suit on, crash helmet. And I looked at the pub, and I could see the window was open. So I just said to him, "You haven't got the time, have you, mate?" And he went to give me the time, put my hand in, grabbed the keys, turned it off, pulled them out. So what's he thinking? Something's not right here. And then I told him who I was, and it's then fight or flight. He opens the door, and he's trying to have a go. So I'm wrestling with him, and eventually got him on the floor, and I just lay on top of him. And I was sweating like a pig because I had this leather suit on, crash helmet. Eventually, the rest of the team arrive, and they get arrested. And they got convicted of numerous cash-in-transit. But what a great thing to have, to be part of and see them do a job like that. They can't say, "We didn't do it." You've got them by the nuts when you're doing that sort of work. And you can see how you get a buzz from that and want to move on to the next one. So it was absolutely fantastic. I loved it. So I did 3 years on there doing similar jobs to that. I mean, we picked one team up in Manchester early morning. We ended up in London later that night, and they were trying to break into a country house. So got arrested for burglary there. So these are the things that go on that the public don't know about.
Yeah.
I said earlier about the police doing good work. This is what it's about. And you don't get to know about that. But these people are being arrested as a result of officers doing that. And, your home life takes a back seat, because I would go to work with an overnight bag because I wouldn't know when I was coming home again.
What was your home life back then?
I was married then, didn't have children. But, for my wife to be, and not being able to get in touch with her all the time, which got worse when I became an undercover officer, because then I'd be away for, days, weeks on end, and she wouldn't know where I was. And you know what you're thinking as a spouse. Where is he? Why isn't he rung? They think you're off partying somewhere. Or
I've always had a theory that officers should date officers.
Officers should date officers.
Or be with officers. Because of
I would say to you, undercover officers shouldn't be married.
No.
And from my experience, not because I don't want to be married, what I'm saying is, what I blinkeredly thought was just my problem became my wife's problem, my children's problem.
What was it your wife did?
She worked for Customs and Excise.
So she said got a relatively normal job. And...
But, they can't comprehend it because they don't know what you're doing. You don't want to tell them everything because they won't want you going to work. No. If you told them some of the people you're involved with, they won't want you going to work. So you don't tell them, and you're carrying all that baggage yourself. Certainly as an undercover officer, because a lot of the time you're on your own, So it's very hard for your family. This is why I'm saying perhaps it would be a good thing if you were single.
Yeah.
Because you don't have anybody else to worry about. Yeah. But, what happened to me later on with GMP, I know now affected my mum, because my mum had a heart attack as a result of it.
Wow.
And I've got a card in my book. There's a picture of a card she sent me, which she wrote at that time, which I found some years after, in my personal stuff. That's why I've included it in the book, in the picture thing. I forgot where I went there, Sean. I was all over the show.
Sorry, can I quickly grab a jacket?
Yeah. Were you
cold,
segueing into becoming an undercover then? How old were you when you became an undercover?
So let me just work that out. I was 30 something.
30 something.
Yeah.
So that's almost 15 years in. Had anything major happen before then that we've not covered?
Not really. No, you know what I mean. my whole thing is about you couldn't get anything better to me than the undercover side, because you're really dealing with major crime. You're not dealing with people who pinch bottles of milk off a step. The undercover aspect is the last tool in the police toolbox that they use. They're not using it lightly. So you are going to get involved then with a lot of major stuff. And, although the Regional Crime Squad dealt with major crime, I was there as a surveillance operative on that, which was a great thing to do. I learnt a lot from that. What I like to think is I took what I learnt from each thing I did to the next thing I did, which is when I said to you earlier, to stay in one place all the time isn't necessarily a good thing.
No.
You can become quite staid, I think, in your ways.
Need that stimulation.
Yeah. Some of those then become uniform carriers, which is a term they used to use years ago. Just a uniform carrier. You're not getting anything out of them. Whereas I like to think, if you look at my record, they've got everything out of me, every department I went in.
So Neil Woods then, who we interviewed, he specialised in going undercover to infiltrate drug gangs like the Burger Bar Boys and things like that. Did you have a niche?
Not necessarily, no, because my persona was as an armed robber. That's what.
You was an armed robber?
Yeah. So, and it was horses for courses. I couldn't be an undercover officer dealing with as a paedophile.
No.
I couldn't do that. So
you had to go into
you've got to be something you are happy in your skin with, and it's what you portray yourself as. Now, I couldn't be a user of drugs because I was 17 stone at my peak.
Do the undercovers who go in as users have to use?
No,
they don't.
No.
But there are circumstances where if they're put to the test,
they're going to have.
They're authorised.
Well, then you see you're in a situation where you've got to make an on-the-spot decision, haven't you? I mean, I dealt a Class A drug to a guy in Moss Side because I had to. Now
to prove your worth.
I only admit that in the book. I did it, but I didn't have done it. I might not have walked out of there that day. So who's going to prosecute me for that?
Give us that story then.
Well, perhaps I'm jumping ahead on that.
Oh, okay, yeah, let's go back.
I mean, I finished on the regional crime squad, and the big problem then was football hooliganism. So the guy I've referred to as H was Detective Sergeant on the regional crime squad. I got on very well with. Always got on his jobs, and he was the only undercover officer in the area at that time. So I got to see his undercover operations, learned a lot from that. So then I finished on the regional crime squad, went on the dedicated drugs unit at Preston, which saw us covering Lancashire, Cumbria. And I've said it in the book, really. I didn't enjoy it as much as it was a lot of, if you went to Cumbria, a lot of rural areas, sat watching farm buildings, from a distance. So it didn't have the get up and go things that I needed. So I did 2 years on there and asked to come off. But I'd also, at that time, passed the sergeants and inspectors exams. So I thought I'll go and get for promotion. So I had to come back to the force. And I went in the CID at Farnworth. And I was working there one Saturday. And in the canteen was H running around. I've not seen him since I left the regional crime squad. And he was obviously on an operation. And he was like a ferret running about. And so I bump into H. And he's on an operation. And it transpires it's this football hooliganism. And with the problems with football hooliganism in the 80s, you had the Hazel Stadium thing where 39 were killed as a result of the Liverpool fans rushing the Italian fans. A wall collapsed, 39 died. There was another one, Luton and Millwall, where they ripped up seats, started throwing them at the police, and a 15-year-old was killed there. So Maggie Thatcher wanted something doing. So H got involved in this and was tasked with setting up a undercover unit to infiltrate football hooligans. And that is how Amiga was first started in GMP. So his chain of command, he was then an inspector. His chain of command was directly up to Assistant Chief Constable. So there was nobody in between, which is unusual in the police because you'd go Inspector, Chief Inspector, Superintendent, Chief Superintendent before you got to anybody of that rank. All that was cut out. So hush-hush was it. And they were doing a job on Bolton Wanderers, which is why he was at Farnworth that day in the canteen. It was a Saturday. And they had success with that. They did the governors from Manchester City. So they infiltrated them. And X amount of people got arrested and charged. But it was all through Maggie Thatcher wanting something done. And I then bumped into him there. I was intrigued. And I knew where they worked from, which was a little desolate police station. They worked in the attic. Nobody was allowed up there. And it was just the undercover unit up there. So I happened to go in one day and I walked up and H was in his office. So I had a chat with him and I said I was interested. How do I get to? So it was a sort of job that was never advertised like other jobs in the police. So you had to go on the deep infiltration course. So he said, I'll see if I can get you, to go on the course, but the proviso is you have to pass that course. Just because we know one another doesn't mean to say you're going to get through. You've got to pass it. So I was happy with that. Anyway, I got on the course, passed it, and got transferred into Amiga in 1990, in February. And at that time, they were involved with Manchester United football hooligans. So I was down then to go as an undercover officer on that job. So my first day, I feel great because I've passed the course. I've got in the office, and they're showing me all the intelligence. I'm going through it, and I know one of them. One of the targets I know. So if I was to go and do that job, the chance of me bumping into him. Now I've got a choice now. I either tell him, this is my first day. I tell him, and what use am I to them then? Or do I just ride it out and think, might not bump into him?
So he knew you were in a
he would know who I was if he came across me.
Right.
And what's the chances of bumping into him? And he featured in the intelligence as a associate of one of the main targets. So there's a good chance, isn't there? So I felt like I'd fallen at the first hurdle, but I had to declare it. So I told him. Anyway, what I then did was go on the overt side. So when the operation was running, I was doing the filming and things from different locations. So I didn't get kicked out of the office. I got kept in and did that. But I was gutted, obviously. But an example then of where this could have come to bite me on the backside after was in Hume is a pub called the Grey Parrot, there was, and that is where all the United faithful hooligans used to go on match day. And we had an observation point where we'd be filming it, and it was so unusual when you see the pub at the front, and when the shout goes up to go, they'd all come out, and you wouldn't think you could get so many people in a pub. It was as if they were coming out, going around the back and coming out again. There was that many in there. And on this particular Saturday was 2 undercover officers from our office. And the shout goes up to leave, and they come out and they start walking. Tony O'Neill was the main one there. He's brought a few books out. The Red Army and Men in Black. He was seen as the general of the United hooligan setup. So he puts the shout up, we're off. And when they say they're off into the city centre to look for opposing fans. That's the point. So there's 2 undercover officers in there, we're filming, they come out and they're walking off through the estate through Hume to go to Manchester. They get in there, they're walking along, next minute, shout goes up to stop. And then there's got a couple of sweets with us. So everyone's looking. What they mean is, got a couple of police officers. So them 2 were identified as police officers. And that's what they were referring to when they said he got a couple of sweets.
Yes.
And kicked hell out of them. And left them. And they had to
You
go,
couldn't
went to
intervene
hospital.
or anything, obviously.
Sorry?
You couldn't intervene or
No,
anything.
well,
obviously,
they're in the estate here now. So you couldn't see everything. But they got a good kicking, sent to hospital, obviously, after. And they just carried on. Went and did the business in Manchester with the opposing fans. Now, the point I'm making is, when I said, if I hadn't have declared that I knew that guy, that could have been me getting that kicking. So I rule the day now saying, thank God I told them, because that puts an end to that sort of operation in some ways. You've got to get somebody else involved.
Was it determined how they knew?
No, it wasn't, because you can't go and speak to them and say, how did you find out about him? Just before put another one in, so we don't make the same mistake again. But as police officers, the good thing for me was I'd worked outside of GMP. I was on the Regional Crime Squad, dedicated drugs unit, on a surveillance unit where nobody ever saw your face. So I was out of the system for a good while. So to become an undercover officer later was great for me, because any one of them 2 who got kicking that day, there could have been someone there who said, I know him. I can see faces now from years ago, and I know I'm excellent with faces. I always remember people. Or voices. I can hear a voice in the distance, and I think, I know that.
I'm great with faces, but crap with names.
Well, yeah, I can't remember. I can't remember the names, Beryl. But
Beryl.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now the reverse works with villains. Them 2 police officers in Manchester, they could have dealt with one of these who was in that crowd and not known about it. And then they see him, they go, then they're telling Tony O'Neill. So, right, let's go. And they get him out, get him into an estate where there's no one about. You can't see much. Give them a kicking, and they're off. Yeah, but they're also sending a message out to you, aren't they? And that could happen any time. And it could have been worse, couldn't it? Could have got stabbed or whatever. So lesson to be learnt really with it. And on the, I'm big into NVCs. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Non-verbal communication. So I'm always looking at that, and that says a lot to me about people. So part of that deep infiltration course is being depoliced. So police officers have mannerisms and things they say regularly, and it makes them stand out as police officers. Villains will have things they say regularly. You as doing this will have things you say regularly, And I can look at people and think, you weigh someone up on it. So what the whole point of the deep infiltration course is to depolice you, which makes sense, doesn't it? If I'm meeting you today, Sean, and you're trying to sell me some gear,
He does look like a salesman today.
you're if you're in your role as a drugs dealer, for example, you're happy there, aren't you? Sat there because all you're worried about is that the police don't come through the door.
Yeah.
So you're happy as you are. When an undercover officer comes in, they are not who they say they are. So they're not as at ease perhaps as you are. But you, if you're looking at them, might pick something up. So on that deep infiltration course, we had one officer who came on it, who went into a pub in Hume, which he thought, and this is how the course was run, was a real life situation. And it was sold to them that we've got a low level job here, but this person's selling something in there. We want you to go in, see how you go on. So they think they're meeting real people, yeah, which gets the bottom going, obviously. You know, it's low level. Because you don't want to cock it up, do you? You want to do a good job, on the course. So they go in, they're in these surroundings in Hume, meet these so-called targets, who are really police officers. And they've got something to knock it out, obviously. So he goes in, this particular lad, and they offer him whatever it is. And he says, right, I'll go make some inquiries. Now, who uses that terminology?
Police.
I'll go make some inquiries. And the other thing he did was he rocked on his feet.
What do you mean?
Like police officers. When
like
in the past,
yeah.
in the past, it was police officers on the street, and they'd rock on their feet, man. And it's little mannerisms, and you know, if you have them and they're instilled in you as a police officer from going through Bruges, yeah, you are a certain way, so you've got to get rid of that baggage and not stand out as a police officer before you even open your mouth. Otherwise, you might as well walk in to that drugs deal with a uniform on, for all the good it's going to do you. Yeah, because once I meet you and you're happy with who I am, or you think I am, we're off and running then, aren't we? So that's the whole point of being depoliced. And MVCs stand out a mile. You know, you've got to be sorted with that. Otherwise, you're not going to get anywhere.
How easy did you find it to depolice and slide into your new action
I
role?
found it quite easy, but I put it down to like Shay. You know, Shay's from Collyhurst. You know, his upbringing, when you have him on, it's like I just knew what to say, what to do, and act that, and that's what you're doing. You're an actor.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're an actor playing that role, and it depends on how well you play that role as to whether you're going to have any success. And there'll be some people, and I say this, there'll be some people out there, police officers, who wouldn't want to do an undercover officer's job, and B, couldn't do it. As long as they got a hole in the backside, they wouldn't be able to do it. And it's horses for courses. I mean, when I was in there, when I started in there were 6 undercover officers in a force of 7,500. So you're one of a very few. I'm not saying that blowing my trumpet. You know, I'm saying it because it's fact. And to have success, which I did on all the jobs I did, it counts for something, doesn't it? And yeah, I'm big into MVCs. So, you know, I'll never be talking to somebody like you. If I was meeting you today, I wouldn't be looking away. I'm going to give you eye contact. Answer. I'm going to give you eye contact, because if I was looking away, you're thinking, so with him?
Sketchy.
Oh, I'm not happy with him. Don't like him. And the last job I did in there, which I'll come on to later, the informant didn't like the undercover officer, so he wouldn't introduce him. So then I got the job, got on well with the informant, and then now I got on well with him perhaps because I was more on his level. You know, he or she, informant, has to be happy with you. They're putting their life on the line with what they're doing, introducing you as a police officer. Not as a police officer, but as a villain. Yeah, this is PC Thingy. He wants to buy some drugs off you. No, I didn't mean that.
What was your first undercover role then?
Obviously, I fell at the first hurdle with United. But then the Met had major problems with their logs of evidence because they were doing all the England home and away games, you know, for football hooliganism. And they'd had a lot of questionable things about their logs of evidence. So the FA took the contract away from the Met, and because of the success Amiga had with Bolton Wanderers, Manchester City, they gave it to our office. So on the day I joined in February, I was told I was going to Italy in June as an undercover officer. So having worked on the Manchester United job as an overt officer on the 9th of June, I remember the date precisely because my dad having died in 78, she got remarried that day, and I couldn't go because I was going to Italy. So I flew out to Sardinia that day, and that was my first major role then. But bear in mind, I'd observed all the undercover jobs with H in the Regional Criminal Squad. I'd done the course, so I I was more than beefed up, ready to go. And I'd been watching it overtly with the filming. So flew out that day, and I made the decision that night before I went to shave my head.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah, because again, like I said to you before, you know, police officers look smart. It's half the battle before you even open your mouth. So if you look the part. So I had earrings, looped earrings, shaved my head, I had false tattoos, and we flew out on the 9th of June.
Do you remember
stopped?
Do you remember what your false tattoos were?
Yeah.
It was British Bulldog and
Obviously.
an MUFC, because obviously Manchester United football supporter.
What were they, transfers?
Yeah, but I had loads of them, and I used to
So
make
you
sure I had to
keep
put them on
doing-
the right spot.
Because, when he starts to look a bit old, they look a bit
I mean,
odd.
what's it? You know, what's he called? The Irish guy who did the Chelsea Headhunters. He did all these undercover documentaries. Irish fella. He actually had Chelsea Football Club tattooed on his arm for real to go and do it, because he brought two of their main players down from Chelsea. They got sent down as a result of it. But again, you know, he did that visibly when he went in the bars trying to get talking to him. You could see it.
Yeah.
So if you saw that, you'd think, it's helping a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, I got stopped going out from the moment we left, searched. Whereas if you went through with a pinstripe suit on and your briefcase, it wouldn't bother you. So it's stereotyping again, isn't it? But I thought that was great, because that meant it was working. Got there, and we were then living and breathing with the England fans.
So how did you just start talking to them?
The problem, what happened with England was that all English clubs have been banned from European games because of the Heysel Stadium. And there was a possibility. Maggie Thatcher didn't want them to go to the World Cup in 1990. But they gave them a bit of leeway and said, this is the big test for you now. If it all goes pear-shaped in Italy, that's it. So we went out there, and they put them on the island of Sardinia for the first part of the tournament, because they were caged off there. It's not like putting them on the mainland. So I think the first 3 matches were in Sardinia. And but the locals treated them fantastically. There was tents put up, washing facilities, entertainment. But what do? They go and ruin it.
Trashed it.
Yeah. And there was fights from the offset, you know. But of a day, when there was no match days, they would spend the day in all the bars. So what do? You move around. You're going around, you're getting talking to people. And it's amazing, in that relaxed atmosphere, in the sun, sat outside bars, drinking, and they see how you look. And then,
With
you
your
know,
transfers
somebody
on.
else from Manchester might be there, and then you get talking to somebody else, then somebody else. And, you know, as you're there for all that time with them, these associations build up. And then you get to know what's going on. And what we had was a control room, which we would have to get to a phone box to ring with a code word, so that they knew who was ringing, and then give them whatever information we had. And although it kicked off on Sardinia, I mean, there was normally 800 police there, and they brought in 3,200 off the mainland to make it 4,000 police. So you can see what they were expecting. And they were also tooled up, you know, riot gear, tear gas. So they weren't going to stand any nonsense. And it did kick off. And I think in the first week, about 400 English fans got sent back. But the main trouble started when we got onto the mainland at Rimini. And we got there, and that's when I was lucky in some ways, because it kicked off in Rimini, big style, big riot. Although you could contact the control room about certain things and give them a nods up, there would be spontaneous stuff that went off. You can never plan for that. And that particular day, that's what happened. And it was like bricks, bottles being thrown left, right and centre. They were firing the tear gas, and they were after you then. So I ran. I wasn't even with the others I should have been with. I was on my own. And I was on this road. I took pictures, which I've got in my book. It sounds daft, really. You know, I happen to have a little camera with me. And once a policeman, always a policeman. And I ran, and this tear gas was coming. There was bottles and rocks flying. And I stood against the wall, because my philosophy was, at least I don't have to worry about what's behind me then. I can see what's in front of me. And I stood there, and a lad who I don't know stood next to me. Must have had the same idea, and he stood. Then I heard him shout, and when I looked, he'd been hit in the face with a rock. and he went down on the floor. Now, that could have been me. You know, I could have lost my eyesight or whatever that day. So what do? As a police officer, I should be helping him. But I'm not a police officer, I'm a hooligan. And I'm now it's like survival of the fittest. So I ran off like the rest of them did. And we got into a pincer movement with the Carabinieri. And they got us on a garage forecourt and on the floor. And if you try to get up, they come over and beat you up. Or if you see you with a camera, they smash that up. But covertly, I got a few pictures, which you can see in the book as well, with them stood over us with the tear gas on their rifles. Wow. And we got arrested, taken to the Nick. So that was one incarceration.
How did you get out of the arrest?
Because the way it was set up, you'd have a welfare team. So if you went missing, they would know where to go and check then, and find out if you'd been locked up under your false name.
Yeah.
And then you would be taken out. But not, let him out, he's a police officer, you know, in front of everyone. It would be done discreetly so that you could then carry on doing what you were doing. And I think a good example of that is we went to Turkey, Izmir, and this is where I will stand up now for football, England football fans, because we were in a bar in Izmir, and it was the night before the match. We're all in there drinking, no problem, and not causing trouble to anybody. Next minute, the window goes in, and there was tables and chairs coming through the window. And it was like a bomb had gone off. So we went outside, and they're all the Turkish lot were there. And they're like this to us, you know, slit your throat. And then the police came, and they didn't want to listen to anything else. Who was at blame? England. So we all got arrested, put on buses, taken to the prison in Izmir. And I spent the night in there with about 40 of us in a cage. And it was just a hole in the floor of the toilet. And it stunk to high heaven. And now, the thing about what I said to you before, all the rest of them in there with you are real Joe Bloggs and real football hooligans. You're a police officer pretending to be Joe Bloggs. And you've got to keep that up then all night. You know, whereas you might just want to go, do a break from that now. You know, get my head in gear. So we didn't get out then till the following day. And the way it was done was you were taken off in groups to go to court. And they wanted compensation for the bar. So we got fined. But when we left, they thought we were going to court, but we didn't. We got took out. And then what a great talking point after, to be able to say, because we were really there with them. So you remember when we were in Izmir? You know what I mean? It's real. It's real. So you become even more of a real person to them lot. Yeah. Same as in when we went to the Euro Championships in Sweden, Malmo. They put up tents there for everybody to live in, and they ruined that. They smashed the main shopping street up, and I saw an ITV cameraman with his big camera on his shoulder, and they attacked him, took it off his shoulder and swung it round and hit it on the floor, and it smashed into 1,000 pieces. Now they got arrested because we'd seen it, could see who it was. But one of the things they did was they were going to have another do with the authorities, and they put a couple up on the beer tent, jumping up and down. And the signal was going to be, when they go to get them off, that's when we're going to kick off. And we fed that to the control room. What did they do? Just left them up there. So it got diffused because they bouncing away up there. Nobody come to get them off. So that was the end of it. They came down eventually. So that, by having the intelligence when you're in amongst them, sorted it out. So, yeah, I mean, that was a real eye-opener. And to witness some of those riots and what they did and how they smashed things up, you see them for what they're really like. And these people, some of them hold proper jobs down in the week.
Yeah.
This is what amazes me. You know, you think
like
of what football hooliganism is.
It's like a tribalistic thing, isn't it?
And I've listened to this Mariner, who was the guy from Chelsea Headhunters. He says it's addictive. It's like drugs. It's like alcohol. It's an addiction. They love going fighting. And I mean, they'd be on the phone to rival clubs who's a contact they have in the rival club they're playing that day. Where do you want to meet?
Yeah.
It'd all be set up. And what they're trying to do all the time is dodge the authorities on the coaches so that the police didn't intervene. But they were all ready for a rumpus somewhere and organising it. You know, it's not like they've just gone on the lookout for someone. They've gone, let's have these. It's been arranged, which is crazy. And one of the guys on the United job who was identified, he works in the admin at Sedgley Park Training School for GMP in the week. Yeah, at weekends he's a football hooligan. So he got identified. So they come from all walks of life. And we used to have a couple of come from Tottenham and they used to come and stay with us in Manchester. Tottenham Steve was the worst, and he was a postman. He'd left his wife, 3 kids, left them, because his whole world was Tottenham Hotspur. Postman used to pinch the credit cards when he could, that were in the post. That would fund his travelling abroad. And he came to stay with us one night, and we went out, and we got back to the flat, and I couldn't get him out of the car at the back. So the rest of them come in, but he stayed outside. So I went in the house, and through the night I was checking on him. I'm a police officer, I've got somebody in the car here who, what if I found him dead in the morning? So I had to keep checking on him. Anyway, next morning I go out, he'd peed all over the back seat, because
lovely.
he was pissed when he went to bed, and been sick. And then he came in, you know the first thing he asked for? A can of lager. So this is the sort of people you're dealing with, which would go goes against the grain with you, but you've got to laugh at that and think that's great. That's what it's all about, isn't it? You know. What
was the story earlier that you said it was going to come later, that in Manchester, close shave?
Which one was that? Got me thinking now.
Yeah. It was an undercover one.
Was it?
Yeah. You said that's coming later.
Right. Well, I must come on to it then, because I did the football, and you know, I've had a company from London approach me a few weeks ago to do a 3-part documentary on that.
Oh, really?
And I don't want to do it.
Why not?
Because I don't want to talk about football hooliganism. I want to talk about the main thrust of my book.
Yeah.
No one wants to talk about Masons, things like that. That's what it's about. And I said to you before, I wouldn't be sat here if what had happened to me hadn't have happened. I wouldn't be here talking about the undercover side. Because some people have said, haven't you took a chance by doing this? Well, yeah, I have. But that's how much it means to me, you know, to get that story out there. So, I came back from there. We did all the England home and away games. So I travelled all over. I went to Russia, obviously Italy, Spain, Holland. So, you know, I got to go all over the show with it, really. And it was great to do that, which then gave me a bit of a grounding for what I then went on to do. Because GMP could see the benefit with this Amiga unit of being able to use that in serious crime. You know, the infiltration technique. The big difference was years ago, they used to do bust buys. Have you heard of that? So I could meet you.
Yeah, Neil
I could be introduced to you this morning, and you'd have some gear for sale. And later on that day, I'd come and buy it off you. Yeah. So then that was how they were doing it, bust buys. But then villains got a bit wary, and they wanted to know that I'm really Joe Bloggs. So the way the Amiga unit did it was you infiltrate the community. So I would have a house, a car, pubs where I could take you, and you'd know me as Joe Bloggs. So, and they'd want to see that before we went any further. So that's the difference. You know, it was getting harder and harder all the time to convince people you were who you. And if you've got out about you, you're going to want to check that out, aren't you? You know, if I turn villain now, I know exactly what to do to check somebody out because of what I've already been through. And I wouldn't be happy and do anything or talk any sort of villainy until I was happy with who you said you were. And that's how it goes. So we would infiltrate the community. So that would mean, as I say, having vehicles registered to you, false addresses, and be able to take you to pubs where they'd know me as Joe Bloggs. And we could go in there, have a night out, and you'd be more than happy who I said I was. And again, I've lost my thread there. So I was talking about, I finished the football. And then they decided we could use this on more serious crime. So I got the very first job in Amiga, which was on the crime side. And when it was the football, it was under X department in GMP, which was uniformed operations. That's where that department was under. That's when H was under immediate to the ACC. CID in GMP thought, this is great, we'll have a bit of this. So they moved it to the CID. So then his line of command went through the normal rank structure. He didn't have as much of a say in it as perhaps he should have done. So first job was a team from Bolton who were dealing in Amphet. So they were using a gym in Bolton. So I started going there. Slowly but surely, started to stand out. Got into one of them, got talking. You then realise you're on the same wavelength as them. And before you know it, I'm into them. And I put an order in. They thought I needed some amphet for a record producer who was having a party at his house in Cheshire. So I took them, and we had an office in the old, where you used to go and tax your car in Stretford. There's an office block. We had an office there, and H played the part of the record producer. So I took these to this office to introduce them to him. We had a meeting in his office in this taxation place, and he put an order in with them. So I took them off, and then I met them further down the line. They brought 2 kilos with them this day. It was in a black bin liner full of soil because they'd had it buried, in case any of their houses got searched. So the idea was for them to put that in their car and follow me to Stretford. When I got there, they give it me. They didn't want it in their car. So obviously the plan had changed, but there's only me knows about it. So they're following me in the car, and I've got, because I had a mobile phone then, I had it in between my legs as I'm driving, trying to dial the number for the office to tell them what's happened. So we get to Stretford. They stayed outside on the main road. I drove in the car park. I went in, and it's being monitored now from all different angles. But they had, and it was well known, they would try and get away if put in a position. So the decision was to strike then, take them out. And they went to the car and they tried to drive off. So they smashed the windscreen and the side windows, dragged them out. And they got arrested, obviously got charged. And I got a buzz from that, when I said to you before about getting a high, to have fooled those people that I was who I said I was, and then get them arrested with the gear was great. So I was on a roll then, and then from that minute on, we started doing more crime jobs. Next one was in Moss Side, a guy who had a record store in the precinct. I got introduced to him. He was knocking out heroin, and this is where I got called for being a bit of a, what would you call it, maverick, because you have a plan before you go to meet these people, and they plotted up on Moss Side precinct where the record store was, and the idea that day was I would go and meet him and come out. So they had no surveillance team. All they did was sit at the front and watch it. So I go in and meet him. We're having a chat, we get on well, and he says, "Come with me." So, what do? You don't go, "Oh, I can't come with you. What's he going to think?" So I followed him, and we went out through the back door of the precinct. And he waved to a car. There was all private hire cars at the back. Another Afro-Caribbean guy who's driving it pulls up. We get in, we drive off. So he's taking me now to the house of this fella called the Lizard. If you saw his face, you'd know what I meant.
Why?
And he's obviously part and parcel of the setup. So we go to the house, he comes out, gets in the back, and we're off driving around, and he's asking me who I know. This is the time now where you're under pressure to convince him. Because also, we had a police car behind us at one point. Now, I know who I am, and he's obviously looking back, thinking, what's going on here? But again, he's in that normal domain, isn't he? So as long as your MVCs don't give you away and everything, and you stick to the what you should be doing, it's not a problem. That day, arrangements are made, and I attend a house later on in the afternoon, and the gear's delivered, and they all got arrested. So again, another job where it went well. And that was a Nigerian diplomat's wife, who was his neighbour, who had the gear in her house. And she, on a phone call, brought it from there to the house where I was. When I went out to get the so-called money, as he thought, that's when they went in and all the stuff was on the table. So he banged to rights. How can they say it's not ours? It was his.
Exactly. Did you infiltrate any of the Manchester crime families?
There was a job at the very end, which was one of the major crime families in Manchester, which also involved a bent police officer.
Are you able to say which crime family?
It was connected to the QSG, as they're known, Quality Street Gang. Have you ever heard of them?
Yeah. No.
Yeah, well...
What Quality Street Gang?
It's from an old advert on the telly years ago.
Right.
Your car used to pull up outside a bank, and these cartoon figures would get out with big Crombie coats on, dark glasses, fedora hats, walk into the bank, looking like gangsters. And then they go into the inside of the jacket, pull out Quality Street, box of Quality Street.
Couldn't have that advert
And they
these
lot
days.
walked in somewhere in a nightclub in Manchester, and someone made a joke saying, "It's the Quality Street Gang," and the nickname stuck with them
Yeah.
for years. So it was to do with that, and they were also connected to the John Stalker affair, which when I mention that in a bit, that'll probably fall into place.
Yeah.
Did another job around the corner from the Hacienda. Is that what I was talking about before?
Earlier,
Yeah. So got into a team there. They've just come out for after importation of drugs. Through an informant, got introduced to them. Started knocking about with them. Put another order in for ecstasy tablets, and they were again with Amphet. So it was the first time GMP had ever let any money go for a kilo of Amphet. So it was like $2,500, I think, at the time. So I bought that at a house in Blakely. And if you ever watched the video, they were out, looking up and down, watching again for anything that's untowards. And they were happy, obviously, because they had the stuff brought in. I bought it, come out, because that went well, they were more than happy then. And this is where I had the wine bar around the corner from. And if you go down where the Hacienda was, it's all railway arches. And what they did was they made them into units. So I acquired this one, and the information to them was I was making it into a wine bar. So they would come and give me ideas about what I could do. Because they're thinking, Hacienda's here, we can make a lot of money here with the old drugs. So I made it out like I was listening to them. Yeah, we'll do that. Anyway, this particular Saturday, I put an order in for 6 kilos, and they brought it to the unit. So what happened then was I was inside, they brought it, I checked it, and then I had a pre-signal I was going to give for the strike. So they're in the unit, happy as Larry, expecting me to get the money in for them, which was outside, which is why I've gone to make the signal to whoever to bring the money in. And I give the signal, big truck pulls up, drug squad get out, and they're in. I run off, leaving them in the unit. So what they're going to say at interview, it's not mine, it's him who's just run off. So as I'm running off up Whitworth Street, there's a backup team coming, arrest team, who don't know who I am.
Oh.
So they think I'm one of the villains running off.
Right.
Yeah, because they haven't been briefed properly that morning. So they grab me, and I'm thinking, trying to make it look good here. So I put up a bit of a struggle, about 5 of them. And I realised that they're not making it look good. They really think I am, because just the way they were talking and what they were doing to me. So next minute, they kicked my legs. I hit the floor, broke my cheekbone, and knocked my tooth out. So I get dragged up off the floor, handcuffed, and at that time they're bringing these 2 out of the unit. So they see me. I'm put in the back of a police car, taken to Bootle Street, on the cell block. They get brought in, and they're put in cells further down, and they shouting to me, "Keep your mouth shut when you go for an interview." This is what they're saying to me.
Yeah.
So I get took out, as they think, to go for an interview, and I go to hospital. That's when I found out I've got a broken cheekbone. They get interviewed, and as I said to you before, they say, it's not ours, it's his gear. So they commit themselves to a lie, and then they're told, Joe Bloggs, he's a police officer. Yeah, so then they're thinking, is that true? Or what? Because, if it is true, we're knackered because of what's going on in the past. So, that was great. And what happened there was, because of the cock-up with me getting my cheekbone broke, it was then policy that on the morning of any strike from then on, they would take a picture of the undercover officers. So that they would show it at a briefing. Everybody would know what you look like.
Yeah.
So that would never happen again. And all I said was, I want it in my record that you've done that to me in case I lose my eyesight and lose my job. And that was agreed. And, so you go through things like that. Again, which I'm raising that issue because of what they did to me later on. I did that and took it as... I can understand what they were doing. They might have there's this thing about reasonable force in an arrest. And it's another point I used to raise with students later on. Was the force they used reasonable in them circumstances? To have 5 people on me, and although I was 17 stone and putting up a bit of a battle, there was not what I need to do. what they did.
No.
It's because they really thought I was a villain, you know, and I paid the consequence of that. So to me, that wasn't right. But you know, I just took it as another experience and got on with it, and moved on. So you know, that was great, and that operation went well, and everything was going fantastically. I mean, I did a job. We're talking about police corruption in a bit. I did a job here in Liverpool. It was a guy knocking heroin out again, involved in a big team here. He had a cafe opposite Wavertree Police Station, right, of all places. It was about 4 levels, the unit, and I got introduced to him, and we got on well again, and we're off and running, and I put an order in for heroin with him, and ecstasy again. And this particular day, when the deal was going to take place, a technical team had gone to Wavertree Police Station, and immediately opposite his cafe was the property store. So they had to drill a hole through the wall to put a camera watching the cafe for when I arrived later on in the day. So it was all filmed. Yeah, so but it was on a need-to-know basis. This is the point.
Yeah.
So they don't go in and shout out to everybody at Wavertree Police Station, we're doing this. It's on a need-to-know basis. So that camera gets fitted. I arrive late in a big truck because he also thinks I'm into amusement machines as well as villainy, and he wanted one for his cafe. So I went and got one from a police club, put it in the back of the truck, and brought it for him to see. And I pull up outside, and there's a lad who's pretending to be my brother with me that day. Now, because we've got all the money in the truck, he stays outside. I go in, and this Alan, who's in the cafe, great, as relaxed as us, sat here. Everything's going fine. He said, I'll make a phone call in a bit, have the stuff brought around. So I said, oh, great, you want a brew? Yeah. So we sat chatting. Anyway, his phone goes. So he goes off, comes back to me with a totally different look on his face. He says, I've just had a phone call to tell me there's a camera over the road watching us. Now, I know that's true because of part of the job. But I'm expecting them to say, I don't know who you are. Yeah. But it was whoever's told him isn't sufficiently in the know to know that I'm a police officer. They've obviously got wind of the fact that they've been in and fitted a camera watching him. And at that time, there was a bench chief inspector called Elmore Davis, who had been head of the drug squad.
Oh, God.
And he was in the pay of villains in that area. And I don't know if you know the story. He was well into one of the gladiators, Ahern, who was Warrior. Remember the Gladiators program?
The program, yeah.
Yeah, well, he Warrior. He lived with Warrior in a flat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the phone call to the cafe was made from Wavertree Police Station, they found out later. Yeah, so this is how corrupt, when you talk about corrupt, and when people call the Omega unit, they call it secret squirrels, and, laughing at them because of how hush-hush it was. This is why it needs to be hush-hush, because there are corrupt police officers. And when you're going into a situation like that, it's your life you're talking about. So, and what I'm saying is, Elmore Davis was into like Curtis Warren, yeah, in his setup, and he was going for a promotion, got it knocked back, and he famously was on a documentary they were filming at the time when he got the phone call to say, "You're not getting made superintendent." Yeah, that was on this documentary, and his famous line was, "Fuck him." That's what he says on the documentary on the telly. Right. And when he says that, he means, well, it's to you now, the police. I'm doing my own thing. So what happens? He's not unduly concerned. He says to me, "This happens all the time. They're always watching me." So I clear off. He rings me in half an hour. We go to the Rocket at the end of this 62 here. And they bring the gear there and they got locked up. So I got locked up there, took to the Nick with them again. So I was locked up again there. But there's a case of corrupt police officers again involved in that situation, and it's frightening, really.
The drugs always flows because the black market in drugs gets bigger every year.
Well, yeah, I mean,
it corrupts every profession it comes into contact with.
Yeah.
It will corrupt some people.
Yeah,
The drugs never stops. It gets more prolific every year.
And I read somewhere recently, I think it was like 320 billion profit from drugs.
Yeah.
And I also read at the same time, it actually buoyed the financial market in 2007.
Yeah.
And that was, drugs money. Mm-hmm. It got them out of the mire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it was writing about Escobar. I learned that drug laws made plants more valuable than gold.
Yeah.
So you can't stop it, no matter who you arrest.
Yeah, you can buy a plant at $60
a kilo, 60,000 a kilo in the streets of America in cocaine.
Yeah. And these jobs I'm talking to you about, it was great because, some of those people took them off the street, but you're not eradicating the drug problem because it just goes on and on. And, and that camera that filmed that opposite Wavertree police station that day, the funny thing about it was when you watch it after, those villains had their own surveillance team because you could see them. Yeah. As I pulled up that day and went in, there was these same faces walking about. Now, what they're doing is they're looking for, is there anything unusual? Any police about? Is he who he really says he is? They're still looking right up to the last second before you buy that stuff. And it was so obvious on the film. They had their own surveillance team, the villains. So, there you go.
When did it become Masonic then?
Right. So I'd done that job. H was still in charge then. And then I did a job here on Granby Street, which was Curtis Warren's area. So just a little bit about that. Obviously, they're knocking out heroin and rock there, cocaine. So Merseyside police saw that as a no-go area for them. They'd even tried, if you look at Granby Street, there was some terrace houses, and on the gable end wall, they fitted a camera. And again, it's through Elmore Davis's type within the police. They got to know about it. They went in, found it, and they put a big arrow in paint, like that police camera they painted on the wall. So that's what they were like. So Merseyside police come to GMP, to the Muga unit, and says, "We've got this problem. Can you sort it or do something?" Because it was just an open market, but you wouldn't be in there if you weren't buying drugs. Yeah. So they tasked the office with doing that, and as an individual who was going to go on it, they said, "You make your own mind up. What story you're going to have for being on Granby Street as a Mancunian? Buying gear." So what I did was, I had an old Rover with a tow bar, police car, and I bought off a mate an old Caravan, which was only held together with cobwebs. It was horrible beige with orange. And what I did was, I painted on the side of it, landscape gardener. Yeah. And then the technical team at the office, they fitted cameras in the indicators on the front of it. And the car was fitted with audio, and I had to remember before I went in to switch everything on. So when I drove into Granby Street, I did the very first buy on Granby Street, which was, again, Pampers time, because there was no OP there watching me go in because they couldn't get any cameras in. So I had to drive that long street to Granby Street where they were dealing. And there's a row of shops, Caribbean food shop and everything. And they also fitted a camera on the side of the Caravan. So as I drove past, it was filming everyone's face as they stood looking out. And they're looking at this Caravan with landscape gardener on. And it became great for me because as from that moment on, every time I appeared on Granby Street, they knew what I was there for.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a calling card, which was great. So my idea was, I'm a landscape gardener, not a professional one. I've got this shitty bloody Caravan.
Did anyone come up and ask you?
No,
services?
No, not that. I didn't get that far, but it was a good excuse to be in Liverpool. So I'm doing gardening and I'm picking my gear up while I'm there. So I drove in and I pulled up, and one of them came over to me. "What are you after?" So I told him I wanted a rock, and he says, "Pull up in the side street." So I went around the side and try and reverse a Caravan in a side street. It was a nightmare. So then I pulled up, and basically what you then got was footage of his face coming to me and what he's saying, because it's being recorded in the car. So he had a bag, which he opened up, and I had my choice then of what I had. Give him the money, I'm off. And that was how it went. And we built it. You had to get a deal off every one of them twice to prove that they were dealing. So I think there was about 35 arrested on that. But to go in every day And the other thing I was fearful of, once I got back after that first buy, if that was crap stuff, yeah, would you go back? You wouldn't be going back then, would you? There's no customer services to go back to and say, yeah, I bought this yesterday, it's rubbish. But it was good quality stuff. So the operation went really well. So I did that. So then H left halfway through that operation. And we got a new chief inspector, a fellow called Ken Seddon. I'll say that name again. Ken Seddon, who came in. And up to that point, he'd been no undercover experience whatsoever. He came in the office, and one of the things he said openly was, I don't want any, I can't say his name, any H clones in this office. So he hated the previous guy. I don't know why, but he did. Now, I was happy to be a H clone because I learned everything off him. Yeah, it got me in the position I was in at that time. So I didn't like him for that reason. But like one of the things we used to do in there was the cars, covert cars were bought from auctions and then registered to false addresses. From the moment he came in, they were purchased from his mate in Oldham, who was a car dealer. Now, what I'll question with that is, has he been vetted by the police? When he goes to the pub at night and says, I'm selling cars now to the police to use on operations, you know, who's he talking to? Is it compromising undercover officers? Yes, it is. Because you just don't know who he's talking to. That should never have happened. So that was what he was doing. Another occasion he comes in and he says, we had covert properties everywhere. I want everybody to hand the keys in for the flat at Salford. Regional Crime Squad want to use it on an operation. So everybody does, except for one lad who was off on leave. He comes back on the Monday, doesn't know about this conversation that's gone on, goes to the flat, tries to get in. It's locked on the inside. So he bangs on the door, and the door's opened, and there's this guy in his underpants. And it's Ken Seddon's brother, who isn't a police officer, living there with his wife. So he's installed a member of his family in an undercover officer's house.
Wow.
Yeah. So just look at that. And again, who's paying the rent on that property? The police authority via your taxes. Yeah. It's for the use of undercover officers. So you can't go putting somebody else in it. Yeah. So he did things like that. He went to Italy in the drug squad's Caravanette, which was an observation vehicle. Took his family to holiday in it. Gets clocked by customs going out. Now, if I'd have done one of those things, I'd have got sacked. Yeah. So you're going about Masons now. I knew he was a Mason because in his drawer, in his desk, I was looking for a file or something one day. There was his daggers and his apron in the drawer. And I've also heard when he worked on a division somewhere, he was well known on afternoons for clearing off at night, going to the lodge meetings. Yeah. So the CID in Manchester, renowned for Masons. Yeah. Good example, a guy called Peter Toppin was made head of the CID when John Stalker got suspended off the shoot to kill inquiry. John Stalker, and I put an excerpt of it in my book from his, he says, had he not been suspended and been in force, Peter Toppin would never have got made head of the CID because he didn't have the experience as a detective. So when he comes back, when he's acquitted John Stalker, he hears these stories about what Toppin's been doing. And he gets him in. And what he's been doing is he's been putting all his Masonic police officers in positions in the CID. So all the fraud squad were Masons and all the drug squad were. And John Stalker says to him, it's come to me notice this, is it right? And he says, yeah, it is. And he said, they are the only people I can trust. Based on everything else being equal, I'll always pick a Mason above anybody else. So how can that be right? If you're a Mason and a police officer, I'm a Mason. I'm not a Mason. We go for a job, and they go, we're both the same in terms of experience, and they pick you because you're a Mason. That can't be right. And he openly admitted it. He said that's what I'd do. I'd do it again. So again, it shows you the corruptness within GMP of what went on there.
What was the dagger and the cloak like?
What was
the dagger and the cloak?
It was just these little daggers in a sheath.
Yeah.
And obviously one of these they have all this braiding on them, don't they? The aprons.
Are they white?
Is it embroidered?
I can't remember the exact colouring of it. I mean, it depends on which lodge you're in as well, I believe. So it's like there's a lot of, I think, gold braiding on it, but it comes down to about there, doesn't it? And then they have the gloves as well, white gloves.
White gloves?
Yeah. So I knew he was, and I also knew the head of GMP CID at that time, Dave James, was. Yeah, but I always thought he was a good guy. So anyway, he doesn't want any H clones in there. So I do a job with some Ram Raiders who were regularly they used to take steroids and they'd go to a gym, build themselves up. Then the jobs they did was with ski masks. So they'd go ram raiding all over the Northwest. And that was one job I did without an informant. So we had the information about them, but no informant. So I started going to the gym where they were pumping themselves up. And I didn't speak to them. I just went in every day when they were there. And I got friendly with the owner. And I'd be bringing stuff in that they thought were knocked off. I'd be selling it in the gym. And I had a Maserati outside because they would go and pinch cars as well, high-powered cars to do the ram raids.
It had a nice Mazda.
So I always left it at the front, and I left one day and they were all looking out the window at me. So they're either looking, saying, I'll have that car, or he seems a bit villain like us. So anyway, what I do was I could never go in as a ram raider with them because I couldn't be sat in a car with them while they're doing ram raids because they knocked a police officer over one night. And imagine if it got in the press then that they killed someone and they had a police officer sat with them. So I had to go in above them. So I went in as a handler of stolen property. Yeah. So what I did was got into one of them at the gym and then I got into the rest of them. And they started bringing all their ram raid stuff to me, a flat I had in Lee. So I had to be certain to get there before they came. But they'd drop it all off at my house and it'd all be on video. Yeah. So one of the last jobs they did was a motorcycle dealership in Preston. And they had all the leathers away, all the helmets, all the boots. And they rang me and said, do you want it? So I'm not going to say no. So they brought it to me. And this was just before the Easter holidays, when we had the bank holidays. This is GMP again for you. So GMP weren't going to let any more money go to them. They wanted them arresting. So this was the day before the bank holiday. So what did they decide? There's no way we're paying double time to police officers to interview them. Yeah. So they wanted me to put them off till after Easter for payment. So how do you do that with these? Because they're chomping at the bit to get the money.
Of course.
Yeah. So I had to come up with a story and tell them some money was owed me and I had to go to London. So they were happy with that because I'd built up a good personal setup with them, and but that ruined my weekend then at home because I couldn't go anywhere because they're thinking I'm in London. If by chance I bumped into anybody, it makes it out to be a lie. So it ruined it, and I put them off till after the Easter holiday. They all came to the flat after. They all got arrested. Now that was a great success, and halfway through that operation, this Ken Sen got me in and said, your time's up now. Here, you go in. So I'm thinking, what's that about? Where am I going? So he says, I'm off for a week. I want you to think about where you're going. Come and see me in a week's time. So there was no suggestion of me going on the welfare side. Yeah. But he tapers it with, you've been put in for the Queen's Police Medal for your jobs. And the lad who worked as my brother on those jobs, who I mentioned earlier, he told him he was getting it. Now, the big difference between me and him is I did 6 years as an undercover officer. He did 2 because he had a child who was ill. So he had to come off and go on the welfare side. But the jobs we did together were very successful. So he told us both we were getting the Queen's Police Medal. So I thought, something's not right here. So he goes off for the week. And as an undercover officer, you couldn't go to police functions, police courses, or police training establishments. You had to stay clear of them all because you become de-policed. So I made the decision over the weekend to go to GMP headquarters and see the head of the CID, this Dave James, because I wasn't happy about what Sen had told me. So I get there, sat outside his office, and another chief super comes along and says, "What are you doing here, Gary?" So I told him. He takes me in his office. He said, "That's not right. You're staying where you are." So I've seen right through now what Seddon was trying to do. He didn't want me out because I think he thought I'm not playing the ball with how he wants it to be. He was using that department for his own ill-gotten gains. Yeah, it was going to ruin it. So obviously, I come away from there. He comes back after a week, doesn't speak to me. So you know something's not right then, don't you? But I'm still heavily involved in the ram raiding job. When it finishes, I spend 2 weeks transcribing all the audio and videotapes for court. Then I head back to the unit. He ignores me for 8 weeks, then gets me to his in his office. He tells me to be there for 2 o'clock. I get there, 2:45 before I go in. I'm sat outside waiting. So he gets me in, and he's telling me he's never thought about what he's going to do with someone as much as he is with me. Yeah, this is when I make the decision to covertly tape record conversations, because I knew the wheel was coming off with this guy. I found him out in a lie. Yeah, he knows I have, and so he says to me, "I had considered sending you down the road, stabbing you in the back, but act in haste, repent at leisure," were his words. And he said, "It doesn't matter who you go to speak to, they'll always side with me because that's the way the system is." Now, what does he mean by that? They'll always side with me because that's the way the system is. Yeah. So that said a lot to me then. So he had to concede then that I wasn't going anywhere, which proved that he was telling lies. And he says, you'll be considered again now for jobs. But I knew my cards were marked. So anyway, this job had come in now with the QSG, with an informant. And the officer that chose to do that met the informant but didn't get on with him. And he wasn't happy to introduce him. So they came to me and said, will you go in now? So I said, I can't, because the rule was you didn't use the same name on any two operations. You had to set up a false legend. So I said I had time to do it with what's happened recently. So he said, well, we've thought about that. You're going to use the same name as on the ram raiding jobs. And the way we'll work it is you will go in, and once you get established, introduce another undercover officer, and the evidence will start from there. And only the judge at any future trial will know you're a police officer. So I thought, well, that's okay. So I do it. And I get on with the informant, get into him. I go to the London Fashion Show because they've got a rave clothing business going as well. So I end up there. And I introduced this second undercover officer, and I had to be still present because we're waiting for an importation of ecstasy from Spain, where one of the family is. Yeah, when we're waiting on the importation. So I have to still be there, even though I'm trying to distance myself. And he's now supplying the second undercover officer with heroin when we go. But I was based in Newquay. Because they could check me out. Although I'm from Manchester originally, I couldn't say I was living here now because they could check you out. So I got a flat in Newquay at Port Isaac, and I lived there. And we didn't have the system you would have now. But for example, when we went and bought heroin off him, I'd have to get to Newquay because he always wanted us to ring him when we got back safe. Yeah. So if, for example, I'd have rung from Manchester and said, "We're here," he'd have said, "Hang on a minute, I've got something on here, I'll ring you back in a bit." He'd know I wasn't in Newquay. So we had to drive the 6 hours down there and ring him back because we're waiting for the importation coming in. So that carries on, and eventually they get arrested, and his guns seized, money, drugs. So they all get charged. What happens with me then? I'm giving evidence for the ram raiders at Manchester Crown Court, and I'm in the box waiting for the judge to come in the afternoon session, and you give evidence behind screens. Yeah. So the judge has got to agree to that. The only people who can't see you are people in the public gallery. Everybody else can. So as I'm stood in the box waiting for him to come in, I then see these two guys below me looking at me, and they're just writing. So I'm thinking, what are they doing? Anyway, what's happened is they've put the Ram Raiders on remand at Strangeways and then put the people who were arrested from Operation Bluebell, which is the QSG lot, on remand at Strangeways as well. Now, those from Bluebell should never have known I was a police officer. But what do they do at Strangeways? They talk and they discover, because I'm using the same name, that I am a undercover officer.
I thought something like that was going to happen.
Yeah, so they come, and this is the defence team for Operation Bluebell, who are now writing my description down. So, judge comes back, their barrister, a barrister stands up for the Ram Raiders and says, Mr. Glassman, can I have the jury taken out? Or a point of law. So they all go out. He asked me 3 questions. Was you, during Operation Vixen, ever involved in Operation Bluebell? So to answer that honestly, no, I wasn't, because I didn't get involved in it till after. Yeah. So I answered them all to the negative. So then he says to the judge, I want this throwing out because this guy's telling lies. I've got a file here with his statement in for Operation Bluebell saying he was involved. So then the judge looks at how I've answered the questions and says, he hasn't done anything wrong, but they already know now who I am. Yeah. So anyway, the trial continues. When I leave that night, someone tries to follow us from the underground car park when we come out. So the driver had to shake them off. They also got private investigators to find out who I was. I only found that out as a result of finding a confidential report. They didn't tell me to my face this had happened, which puts my family in jeopardy. All they offered me was an attack alarm on my house to the local police station. But considering there was a corrupt police officer involved, do I want... Yeah. No. And all they said was that I was paranoid. Would you not be paranoid if you thought someone was looking for you? So I end up giving me evidence and I get discharged from court and I go off sick. So I'm off 11 months. Yeah. So my time as an undercover officer then is finished. And they keep coming to my house trying to get me back to work. I went from 17 stone to 12. I ended up in the heart care unit. Cameras up my jacksie because I had cancer. And what happens to Seddon? It gets moved overnight. Yeah, because there was an anonymous letter went to the Manchester Evening News and to the Force, apparently, about him. So GMP move him overnight. What do they do with him? They send him as an ambassador to Australia on an anti-corruption inquiry. Anti-corruption inquiry. And,
wow.
And he gets sent back from there, yeah, for irregularities. When he lands back here, he gets arrested. And he was charged with 20 odd offences of dishonesty, deceptions.
Great.
Yeah. Now, there's a guy who they protected, yeah, and they blamed me for his downfall. So while I'm off sick, going down to 12 stone, I go on half pay in that 11 months. I'm on half pay. I'm struggling financially. I have to put in some insurance policies I had to keep going. Wife's saying to me, how are we going to pay the mortgage? I said, I couldn't care less how we're going to pay the mortgage. I haven't done out wrong. So they backed me into a corner eventually, and I have to come back to work, obviously. So in the November, they've offered me 3 vacancies. One's at video imaging unit, one's at taking civil litigation statements, and the other's computers. I've got no idea about computers. I don't want to be going out taking civil litigation with members of the public who might recognise me. You never know where you have to go. So I had to pick video imaging. They wanted me to come back in December. I said I can't because by now I am depressed. And what I didn't realise was I had PTSD. Not through being an undercover officer, but because of the way they treated me. Yeah. So I said I can't come back in December. I'll have to come back in January after all the merriment's gone. So they agreed to that. And they say, a lot of work's gone into you coming back to work. You go into the video imaging unit, somebody will be there at 9 o'clock to meet you. By now, I'm in dire straits financially. I've got no car. I have to cycle to work. So I cycled the 8 miles to headquarters, get there early, have a shower, parade myself at 10 to 9 at video imaging. Woman on the counter says, I said, is Ian Jakeman here? So she said, no, he's not here till lunchtime. I said, he's supposed to be meeting me. She said, in America. He's coming back at lunchtime. So that's how much thought went into me coming back to work.
Wow.
I had to hang around for hours. And then I'm in that, and I'm then put in a room with no windows, copying tape recordings for court of evidence. That's what I did. And
You got sent to Siberia.
yeah, so they stuck me in there. I was doing that day in, day out. It was rotting my brains. But prior to coming back in the January, I rang my Oppo, who was my brother on some of those undercover jobs, because I felt a bit better. You know, so I rang him. I haven't spoken to him for 11 months because part and parcel of my condition was I backed off from everybody. So I didn't see any friends, family. I just locked myself away. I could happily sit in a room in the dark and be all right, or hang upside down in a wardrobe. I'd be happy with it. And I rang him out of the blue, and he, after the niceties, he says, "Have you got it?" So I said, "Got what?" He said, "The QPM." I said, "No." He said, "I've just got it in the New Year's honours." So he got it. Now, I just want to reinforce the fact, I did 6 years, he did 2. He came in as my brother and always came in second on the jobs. Now, what they did was they shredded my application because they blamed me for Ken Seddon's downfall. It got shredded. So he got it and I didn't. So you can imagine how I felt that Christmas. I went from going up there, down here again. And imagine what Christmas was like. I ate Christmas because my dad died.
Oh, yeah.
So imagine what my missus went through, basically. But anyway, I come back in January, I take out a grievance. And part and parcel of the grievance is, why have I not got the QPM when he did? And yet I've done as much as him and more. Why were these other commendations I was due before I went off? Why have they disappeared? Everything got shredded about me. Yeah.
Disappeared.
Yeah. So I submit my... I go and see the complaints woman who GMP have on their staff for taking out grievances. And she advised me, because you're in a civilian post now, everyone else is civilian, you're going to have to cut that aspect out and go straight to your next line manager, which was head of CID. So I do the report, put it in his pigeonhole in the admin at Chester House, and wait. 2 weeks go by, don't hear nothing. Ring his secretary, he's not had it. So he's had it, ripped it up. Then he blames me for not going to stage 1, even though I'd been advised not to. So I go and see him. I'm tape recording these as well now. So he says he can't talk about the QPM because it's not protocol. But you were recommended. You might get it in 12 months, 18 months' time. But you're still in. All they do, they ring every year, make sure he's still serving.
They're just dangling the carrot.
Yeah, so I thought, that's all right. I took a bit of weight off my shoulders. The other things, he said, they weren't worthy of anything. Yeah. He said, you've had enough commendations. So I said, well, I've earned them. So anyway, I said, I'm not happy with that. I'll go to the next stage, which is the civilian head of GMP personnel. Prior to him being in that position, it was always a chief super. But they then made the decision to have civilians. So they brought him in from some company somewhere as head of personnel. So he's as honest as the day's long. I go and see him, tell him. He says, I'll go away and research this now. Come back and see me in a few weeks. I go back and he says, I've never been so embarrassed in my life. They won't let me see any files about you. So they can't corrupt him. Had it been another chief super, they're able to get him to sing off the same song sheet. But they couldn't with him, so they just don't let him see any documents. So he says, I've never been so embarrassed in my life. I've just come up against so many brick walls. I can't do about it. So what do? I've got no option but to go to the next level, which is Assistant Chief Constable, David McCrone, who I go and see him. I go away for 10 weeks, go back, he's done nothing about it. I'm just told you're seeing things that aren't there. Yeah. So I'm still gutted now, haven't I? I've not got the QPM, no explanation about it whatsoever. But what Dave James shows me during his interview is a report which was put in before I went sick, recommending me for a commendation. And he said the original went missing. So this has had to be reproduced.
Of course.
A new one. He hands it to me. So it's been submitted by the inspector in Omega, dated, for example, 15th of January. It then goes to the chief inspector for him to sign and date. So it's got now the 18th of January there. When I turn it over, it's got the chief super's, "This is not worthy of anything," he writes. And it's got a date stamp from him a month before the other two. So I hold up to the light and I can see where they've Tipp-Ex'd the old date off and then put a new date on it. And what's happened with that is, when I went off sick, they've stuck that in a drawer. And it's only when I've come back and asked questions, they thought, "I'll have to get onto this. We'll make out we've lost the original." So I've got this on tape and I say to him, "What's this?" I said, "This is the original." And he starts swearing, the chief super swearing, which I knew I had him then. So this is the stuff they did against me. And I've got nothing to lose because I'm off the Christmas card list now with the action I've taken. So I've got to take it outside the force, and I get police review. They did an article on me in that, which highlighted it. And I then had a massive fight then, where I was recording everything, even my phone calls at home. And I took them to task over it. And then I was getting phone calls from the Home Office telling me to keep my mouth shut because I'll come to notice for the wrong reasons. I got that on tape. But it was all because they thought I'd done the dirty on the chief inspector, who was a Mason. Yeah, and got him shifted overnight.
Don't mess with the Masons.
Well, no. So this is what they did to me. So I then, 3 years later, get the QPM because I eventually, through going through the system, get a one-to-one with the chief constable, David Wilmot. And when I get to see him, because what they do is they let the good stuff go up, but they don't let the bad stuff. So I got to see him face to face, sat across the table like this. And I told him what had happened. I said, "If you take nothing away more from today, just believe that I wouldn't be sat here today telling you lies. I'm here because I'm telling you the truth." So he then looked into it, and he resubmitted my application. So I then got it in '99, 3 years after I should have got it. So I go to Buckingham Palace, get it off Prince Charles, and I said to my wife at the time, the icing off the cake's gone with this, because it's only because I backed him into a corner. So that was that. I get it. I should be overjoyed, shouldn't I? What I don't realise is I hate the police now because of my PTSD. So I want to punch everyone. Yeah. Anybody in authority in the police, I want to punch them, which isn't a good thing, obviously. But they made me that way. And it was obviously making me ill. So I eventually get to a point where I've had enough, and I go to personnel and tell them that I'm ready to resign. And they moved me to a department in Chester House just to trying to get things sorted. So I'd been there 3 days, was walking up the wall basically, and I went to personnel to see my personal file. Now what you would normally do is ring them and they'd say, "Come in half an hour, we'll show you." And what they would do is take the stuff they don't want you to see out and give you the rest of it. And when you've gone, put it all back in. I arrive at the counter. Fortunately, there's a woman who's just started there and she gave it me. So she gave me a desk to sit down at. And I'm going through it. And at the beginning, it's all my initial application to join the cadets. Got my dad's handwriting on it. And it was like a memory, like a going back in time, and reliving it. And I get to the front and there's a brown envelope, A4. And it's got on the back of it, only to be opened by a divisional or branch commander. This. And it had a piece of sellotape, which had lost its stickiness. So the flap was flapping about. So I thought, it's in my file. Even though it says that, I'm going to read it. I opened it up, there's a report from a superintendent from Y department. 8 years old it is, this. And it's to the ACC Macrone, who I saw on my grievance, who did nothing, telling him that I was corrupt. And I was under investigation 8 years before. Yeah, I wasn't to be trusted. I was paranoid. But basically saying I was corrupt and under investigation. And this is from 8 years earlier. So that day, it was like the last bit of the jigsaw. I realised then what had gone on. So I checked with the Y department to see if I had been under investigation, which I hadn't. So I put a report in then asking why it occurred what was the result of it? And why was I not told? And when you're under investigation in the police, they should serve papers on you so that you're aware. Never had anything like that. So I then get summoned to see the head of the Y, the internal investigations, and he says there was no investigation. All I can tell you is it was a Masonic conspiracy within the CID. It was an unofficial one. Yeah. So this is where I've got it from him. And when I later see Michael Todd, who becomes Chief Constable later, he says to me the same thing. It was a Masonic conspiracy. Wow. Yeah, against you. And that was from the head of CID. And they put a report in my file because I wanted something put in there to negate that, what I'd found. And they put in saying it was somebody effectively in the CID command halted my recommendation for the QPM, shredded it. So it all came out in the end. But all of them then have gone. They've all left the job. They're all there now on the big fat pensions.
Of course, yeah.
And these are the ones who'd stabbed me in the back. Yet try to protect him, who later on down the line gets convicted of criminal offences and was corrupt. So you can see why I think as I do, and why, you know, in terms of the undercover side and everything else, that's immaterial. This is what it's about. What these people in authority think they can do to people.
Yeah.
When just to protect somebody because he's in a bloody Masonic lodge.
To hear it from you, Gary, is so powerful because David Icke can say it, but you've lived it.
Lived it, yeah. And, you know, it ruined... You know what happened to me? Because of this PTSD, I have a red mist comes over me. I can lose my temper at the drop of a hat. And I took my son for his driving test. His driving test at a test centre. I drive in, and I got there 10 minutes early, so we got there plenty of time. Pull up in a car parking space, and we were sat waiting, and this car comes in, and there's a test that's just finished. And the guy who's the test examiner, he bollocks us for being parked in this parking space. I don't realise it's for their cars. So that was it. The red mist come down, and I give him both barrels, right? So I give it him, and he backs off. He must think, right, lunatic, this guy. So we then walk into the test centre. I'm sat with my son, waiting for him to go for his test. And the office door opens about 15 minutes later. It's this guy who I've just bollocked outside, taking my son for his test.
Did he pass?
Yeah, he did.
Oh, thank God.
But imagine how I felt.
Yeah.
Because he went, my son's name. And I looked at him. And I thought I'd ruined it for him. But that is how I could be. And, you know, there's many times where I could quite easily have gone and killed myself. And you know, what have I done wrong? I haven't done anything wrong. I did the job they wanted me to do. I got the results. And yet, that doesn't mean anything. And when you get Shay on, you know, there's 20 years difference between me and him in the police. I was told at the end, you've been a guinea pig. Yeah, you first want to go through the system. It won't happen to anybody else. I've got that on tape where they said that to me. 2 different individuals in the higher echelons of GMP who said that. And Shay, 20 years later, they've done the same to him. And if you, when his book comes out and you read it and you compare it with mine, it mirrors it.
Wow.
Everything. And how he got treated.
History repeating itself.
And it shouldn't happen though, should it?
Not 20 years.
Shouldn't happen. It's because you've got people at the top who don't know what they're doing. And, you know, I should have been able to complete my time as an undercover officer and then got promoted and use my expertise to pass on to others. But they didn't do that. Yeah. And they're willing to throw you under the bus just because of this what as it was then, this system with Masons in the police. Now they look after one another. They'll never admit to that, obviously.
Will it ever be corrected, or is it always just going to keep going?
Well, you know, it's been going on for years and years, hasn't it? And like I say, I've no hang up with Masons per se. My neighbour is one, and I can understand it in business because you want to network and get your business going. So I can understand that. But you know, they've tried in the past to get a register for police officers to register if they're Masons, and they refused to do it. And now it's gone saying it's against the Court of European Rights to do that, so they can't make them do it. And it's all the way up to the top, isn't it? There's judges right up to the legal system. And what about Cyril Smith? He was a Mason, And the allegation is he was protected right up to the end. Hillsborough, the match commander on the day, big Grand Master in the Masons, they got officers' statements altered.
Was Savile a Mason?
Who? Jimmy Savile. I'm not sure about him. I mean, he had his feet well under the...
He was.
He had a police. He did a lunch for the police, didn't he? Every week.
Yeah, he was protected by police officers.
He's probably protected
Yeah.
by Masons.
Now,
at the very
whether he
least.
was a Mason or not, I don't know. But you know, Cyril Smith, unbelievable when you see what he did.
Obscene.
You know,
Obscene.
unbelievable.
Big old predator.
Yeah, for years he's got all the the kids' homes. And he used to say to kids, "Big man's here."
And you wait till you see what this guy looks like. He was about 30 stone.
Yeah, lived with his mum. Always lived with his mum up to his mum dying.
Fucking loser.
And unbelievable.
Sorry, John. I've put there.
Yeah, terrible.
So has the book helped you then in the interviews?
It has. It's it allows me to get this because it eats away at me still now. You know, I'm talking about it today. It eats away at me, and I'll never ever get over it because I, as I see it, haven't fulfilled my career. It was cut short.
Doing this book must
Well,
help, surely.
it has. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, it's like everything, isn't it? When you're a celebrity. I mean, I watched Good Morning Britain this morning, and these so-called celebrities, they get on there. Next minute, the book's being publicised. And unless you're a celebrity, you don't get that publicity. So I need to get it out there as much as I can.
That's the old media. We're the new media.
Oh, I know that.
We're taking over.
Yeah. But, you know, I mean, there's perhaps stuff I've missed out as well today. But, the book has got everything in.
Yeah.
And what I will reinforce is everything in that book is true. And I can back it up. Now, bear in mind, it's been out 12 months next month.
Yeah.
I haven't had one libel action against me.
Good.
For many of these individuals
Yeah.
who I'm talking about.
They don't want a court
Who
case.
have named. And I'd welcome them come out because I'll prove what you said and what you did.
Yeah.
You know, and what I did was I used the techniques I used against villains, against senior officers in the police.
I noticed that.
Covertly
Everything
recorded.
they trained you to do,
I used
you
against
used
them.
against them. I was thinking that when you were saying it earlier. Yeah.
And that's what
They
it's
have
about.
created you.
Well, they said to me, I went to see one boss when I came back to work after being sick, and he said, if we're laying our cards on the table, we said to ourselves, why are we getting this monster when we heard you were coming here? I mean, what sort of a greeting's that? And something similar was said to Shay when he went to a department. You know, treat you with contempt, and like I said to you before, there's a lot of people who wouldn't do that job. It wouldn't count for nothing. I could have been better thought of, sat in an admin office on my backside for 30 years, doing nothing and getting paid the same. Yeah, unbelievable.
So what do you say to the viewers then who've been watching this for almost 3 hours now with you?
Oh, is it 3 hours?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry to have bored you. But, no more than what I've just said to you, really, to reinforce the fact that everything I've said today is true. Yeah. I wouldn't be sat here, like I said to David Wilmot at the end, I wouldn't be sat here talking to you today if what I've said isn't true. That's what I want to take from today.
And what was the name of your book again?
Undercover Policing from the Corrupt Secret Society Within.
Can people message you or follow you on socials?
I'm not on there, unfortunately.
We'll get the Amazon link for your book down
Great.
there.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. And again, I want to thank you for allowing me to come in today and talk about what I've talked about.
It's been absolutely brilliant.
Because I've done other things, and the omit. I did Granada reports, and they wouldn't do anything about the Masons.
Of course not.
No.
It's controlled by them.
Right. So they wouldn't. There was nothing on about that. I did True Spies things for America. That wouldn't touch it.
Yeah.
So this has been like a breath of fresh air today.
Yeah. We
Thanks
we
very
don't
much.
cut anything out. We're uncensored.
Brilliant.
And if you've enjoyed watching this podcast today, Undercover Cop Exposes Masonic Conspiracy. I think that's going to be the title. Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to get the book, that will be down there in the description box. Check it out. I know many of you are fascinated by conspiracies about Freemasons, but to hear it firsthand, someone who's gone through it. I mean, out of all the people I've talked about the Masons, this is one of the strongest stories I've ever heard. How he was actually stonewalled and they tried to destroy him because of that Masonic stronghold in the cops. This is so powerful. It needs to get out there, this information. So thanks for watching this with us today. Let us know in the comments what you think about the Masons and Do you think that they should be eradicated from the police? Is that ever possible? Will this continue? And if you do want some organic cotton clothing, Jen of Boom and Jen can assist with that. Link is in the description box for the video. So prison bump fist. Bump.
I'm also thinking if this goes pear-shaped, we can form as reformers, right, said Fred. With these bald heads.
I'd love one of those hats.
It's absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, that was really powerful.
Yeah, really
Thank
powerful.
you.
Thanks.
Yeah.